quest to conquer Ukraine.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple.
On Friday, G7 leaders decried the Kremlin's efforts to hold referenda in pro-Russian areas of Ukraine, calling them a sham with no legal effect or legitimacy. Donald Trump had a difficult week.
We are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company.
New York's Attorney General Letitia James announcing she's suing the former president and 3 of his adult children for conspiracy. They're accused of falsely inflating the value of the Trump Organization's assets to secure loans on favorable terms. The week will be remembered more than anything else for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in London. World leaders gathered at Westminster Abbey for the service. The Queen was laid to rest later that night at Windsor Castle, from where FSN's Trent Murray reported.
This really was the final goodbye. The state crown, imperial crown, removed from her coffin and that coffin lowered into the royal vault.
And the Queen now lies next to her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. Wall Street will be looking to rebound in the coming week after the Federal Reserve continued raising interest rates but rattling global markets. On Wednesday, the Fed increased interest rates for a third consecutive time by 75 basis points. Previewing the week ahead from FSN's US business desk, Nick Harper.
Investors will get to weigh up the latest data on consumer sentiment and consumer spending. With the latter making up 2/3 of US economic activity, Wall Street will be watching closely as America's willingness to spend may be beginning to be dented by the continued interest rate rises, leaving them less disposable income. Durable goods data, those big-ticket items, will also give a read on how confident consumers feel about making those outsized purchases, often on credit. And the coming week will also provide a look at the housing market with new and pending home sales.
Much of what happens on the markets will hinge on Britain's economic woes. With the pound spending the weekend at its lowest level since 1985, here's more of what former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers had to say about the situation in the UK. He spoke to Bloomberg TV.
Makes me very sorry to say, but I think the UK is behaving a bit like an emerging market turning itself into a submerging market. There's nothing in the pattern of market response in the UK that suggests anything but fear rather than confidence.
Other stories we'll cover in the week ahead. South Africa's energy crisis. There are more power cuts ahead there. And if you've got a telescope, you'll get your clearest view of Jupiter since 1963 as it makes its closest approach to Earth. And that is the Week in Review from Feature Story News. Simon Marks reporting.
Our very own Tracy met farmer Ray Kimball, who says that his horse, Franklin, has the ability to speak full sentences.
When did you first realize he could talk?
Well, I'd hear him saying things when I was sleeping, and then I'd go out to the barn and we'd have some real conversations.
Can we talk to Franklin?
He can't wait to meet you. Say hi, Franklin. What's that? That's a good one.
What did he say?
He said, "Who's the pretty lady?"
Aw. Franklin, do you like living on the farm?
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Did he say something?
Tracy, you live here now.
I spent a cozy night at Ray's farmhouse in a room he called the altar. I learned that the farmer has a whole lot more on his mind than just a talking horse.
You are my beloved.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here. We're kicking off another live Saturday episode. The number for you is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. It's Ian tonight.
And the captain.
We may have Peakless Mountaineer joining us. In fact, we are. He just walked in the door.
Lateness Mountaineer? What?
And I hear a rumor that Zeffin is going to be joining you guys for Beard Talk Live tonight.
The most beard that Beard Talk Live has ever had.
Dun, dun,
tonight,
dun.
We are scheduled to have a total of 4 bearded men on the show.
How many are in ZZ Top? 3. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And the guy without a beard, the drummer, his name is Frank Beard.
Right. That's right. So, hey, you can bring up whatever you want here on Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program. The number is 603-283-6160. Before we get into the news, which we're going to talk about the China social credit score, that idea coming to the United States, because there are some people that want to see that happen, and worse,
They're
perhaps.
working on it.
Yep.
Sure
there's a way to stop it, which, of course, is to get people that care about freedom together in the same geographic area. We're all big fans of that concept here. And I also want to get into the war on drugs as well. The Colombian president has now spoken against the war on drugs.
That's funny. I want to get out of the war on drugs.
As a topic, we'll get into that. But in order to get out of the war on drugs, we also have to get people of a like mindset together physically, I think, in the same geographic area. And today, we had an event in the Cheshire County area here in New Hampshire that I just wanted to kind of relay. We actually had the organizer of this event on the show a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, John Michael DeMay, and he was kind of talking about this as an idea. And the idea was a simple one, but surprisingly, it hadn't been done yet. The idea was, let's get these different interest groups who kind of have some overlap in a lot of areas, but not in all of them necessarily. Different interest groups that like freedom over here and like freedom over there, and maybe they like health freedom, or maybe they're just all in libertarians,
or a 2A group, or whatever.
Whatever. Second Amendment, And so invite these people into the same room and have basically a networking, an excuse to come together and network. And they did that today, and it was very successful. The room was about standing room only. There was a bunch of people standing in the back. They probably could have found seats had they, gotten in and stepped in front of people or whatever.
Was there a mosh pit?
No, not today. It was definitely a peaceful event.
I should have shown up.
There was no issues like that. Of course, mosh pits are all voluntary anyway, but
they are not peaceful, and that's worth pointing out.
They're voluntary.
They are voluntary violence.
Yes, that's right.
Much like a boxing tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just wanted to say I thought it went really well. I don't even know offhand who all of the groups were. They did speak, so everybody who was like representing a group of some sort had 2 to 5 minutes or something.
But
like
as
that
I understand it, you asked a very important question.
I did. I got to speak because NHExit.us was one of the groups, if you will. We had a table there, and we were doing outreach, which also went very well. But when I spoke, before I kind of said whatever it was I was going to say, I said, I want to just take a quick poll. How many of you, and there were over 140 people by my count in that room, so not a bad attendance, people coming from all across the state, far away as the seacoast, to this event. So how many of you currently support the idea of New Hampshire being an independent nation? And I didn't know how it was. Honestly, I figured that it was a friendly room. I mean, I figured it would be half the crowd or something like that. I thought I would do fine on this question, but I didn't really know, and that's why I wanted to ask it before I said anything else about independence. Almost every hand in that room went up together, and and just to clarify things,
it warms my heart.
After they put their hands down, I also said, how many of you want to stay with the federal government? And literally one guy slowly reached his hand up, and that was it.
Wow.
So I'm sure there was some fence sitters. There's probably some fence sitters in that room, but I was blown away by the support already. Without, I didn't even have to give a speech, but then
there's enough of us that the peer pressure is on our side for once.
At least in that room, there certainly was.
I mean, it starts with one person, right? And then that one person everybody calls crazy.
Yep.
Like, oh, that's crazy. We can't. And then the second man steps up, and then the third man and the fourth man, and then apparently the 140th man, right? If that room is read accurately, this warms my heart, because that means not only is there a market for freedom, but there are people who have relocated here or have been born here and raised here who support freedom, who support, hey, yes, let's make a space for people who want to live their lives in a voluntary way, who want to do everything by voluntary agreement alone, and let's make that happen here in New Hampshire.
I would guess the number of people in that room, the number of Free Staters, the number of people who have migrated here as part of the Free State Project, which is this libertarian migration here to New Hampshire. I'm going to guess there were no more than 20% of the room that were Free Staters. Somewhere between 10 and 20%. So it was a lot of people from a lot of different kind of areas and interests in New Hampshire. And then, of course, I gave a speech about independence, got applause. Mike Sylvia happened to be there, who was the prime sponsor of CACR 32, which was the historic bill that earlier this year was filed by some state reps. I'll just explain who he is real fast. Mike filed this bill. Also, Matt Santonastasso, another state rep that loves independence. They both co-sponsored this bill. And the bill would have, had it passed, it didn't, but had it passed the State House and the State Senate, it would have put a ballot question on the bill. It simply would have asked the people of New Hampshire if they want to peacefully declare independence from the United States and become an independent nation. And I said, hey, you guys raise your hands. They did. Everybody clapped for them. So it was a nice thank you to those guys and showed some appreciation for them. Sorry, what were you saying, Peakless?
I was going to ask if you had any idea how many people in that room were in the liberty movement that existed before the Free State Project got going.
Well, that's hard to say.
Good question.
Because there was definitely a certain that's part of what attracted us here in the first place was that there were a lot of people here that were concerned with liberty. And
I met one of those guys. There was a guy who I said, "Well, are you native or are you?" The usual question I ask is, "Are you a native or are you a Free Stater?" And he said, "Actually, I moved before the Free State Project." So there's a lot of people that you would call pre-staters.
That's what I was curious is if you had any guess as to how many were pre-staters. So.
Hard to say. I'm sure there's plenty of natives there and a variety.
It's not frequent when I'm just sort of out and about in my daily life and I start talking about freedom and liberty and that kind of thing, but it happens on occasion. And if I'm out having dinner or at a bar or something like that and I start talking to somebody else about it, I've noticed that there have been people sort of in the audio area, they can hear what I'm talking about, who will turn and listen. And occasionally some people will pipe up and be like, hey, you know what? I was born and raised here and you guys are awesome and I really support this thing. That has been happening a little more frequently than it has, say, in the first year that I was here. Now I'm in my third year or whatever.
Well, it may be because the Free Staters are getting a lot of press now. They're getting a lot of attack pieces. There's a lot of hit pieces, opinion pieces, editorials, letters to the editor that are being published in a variety of different publications. There's a full-on assault against Free Staters, quote unquote. And of course, basically anybody that has a pro-liberty viewpoint is being labeled as a Free Stater these days in New Hampshire. The Democrats, the statists, Republicans, these people are on the attack like I have never seen it. They are spending
I love it.
Big time.
I
Spending
love
big
watching
money
it
on this.
Yeah, if you don't have haters, you ain't doing it right.
Exactly.
Well, and the thing is, the only trick that Democrats and Republicans have is hatred of the other party, and they've been playing that one trick on this pony for the very beginning. And right here in New Hampshire, that means that they have to talk about libertarians.
What's the one thing I keep seeing about the Free Staters are funded by the Koch brothers? And I'm like, well, if that's true, then why do I have to have a day job in addition to in addition to doing this radio show? Why do I have to have a full-time day job to keep things going? If I'm funded by the Koch brothers, where's my freaking check?
Yeah, you really would have enjoyed the last speaker. He was a state representative who had that message of they're trying to get people to hate each other. We need to come together, see the humanity in the other person instead of this whole red team, blue team stuff. So it was a really nice closing speech, and the whole thing was really great. And I think they're going to do more of these things around New Hampshire. So, hey, if you're not in New Hampshire and you love liberty, you ought to get here. If you can't for some reason, borrow these ideas, bring interest groups together, get them in the same room, and have them meet one another. Break the ice. There's more coming up. Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 15th through the 18th for the 7th annual Fork Fest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. Fork Fest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which sold out in 2022. For 2023, we're going back to where it all started, the weekend before PorcFest. ForkFest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 15th through the 18th. You can find out more at the unofficial website forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the ForkFest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the ForkFest forum. You can find links to those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there June 15th through the 18th. forkfest.party. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open if you want to join us here. Whether you want to talk about independence or total dependence, which is, of course, the way they want you to go.
Depends.
That too. 603-283-6160. They want to take care of you from cradle to grave and impoverish you the entire time. The only way out is to say no. Somebody had a shirt at the event today. They were, I think they were giving it away in like a raffle, and it said something like, "You can't comply your way out of tyranny."
Oh, nice.
Like, yeah,
that's a great phrase.
That's the truth. By the way, Bitcoin.com, you want to talk about tools that you can use to achieve more independence for yourself. Cryptocurrency is one of those things. And that's one of the sort of the themes of our table today at the event was we're talking about secession, New Hampshire exit, nhexit.us, and then, of course, things you can do right now to make yourself more independent, like getting yourself acquainted with cryptocurrency or gold backs, gold and silver, things that can protect your wealth from the ravages of government inflation. So if you're ready to start learning about cryptocurrency, just get on over to Bitcoin.com, click Get Started at the top of the page. You'll find some useful information, some introductory videos. You'll learn the basics about these concepts of decentralization. How do you take the value of money out of the hands of governments and banks? How do you protect it? How do you make it so they can't even confiscate it? That kind of thing. You can learn about this stuff. Just go to Bitcoin.com and click Get Started at the top of the page. You can also go to their news site and get the latest headlines over at news.bitcoin.com.
On Saturdays, we talk a lot about freedom and philosophy and, things in the news and like how do we achieve more freedom. One of the best quotes that I've ever heard, and I keep coming back to time and time again, is from Buckminster Fuller. And the quote is, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And if you go back through history, this is how change actually happens.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You don't fight what is. Instead, you build something better, faster, more capable, or does things differently, more efficiently, whatever it is.
And people then move over to that new thing, hopefully, and the old thing is on the outs.
And there was a time where this was the freest country on earth, and
Yes.
the reason that it was is because they started doing all of the things that government was claiming a monopoly on. They started doing them themselves. They had these committees of correspondence and committees of safety and committees of communication, and they were doing all of the things that government was claiming a monopoly on anyway. So the fact that there was a rebellion wasn't really a surprise at that point, because they already had their own government. So that's how we got freedom that time, and it's the only way we're going to get freedom in the future. Is we have to start creating these parallel structures so that we're doing these jobs anyway, but we're doing them in a way that doesn't coerce people.
Like we've advertised for Mark's going to speak in Prague.
Yeah, that's right.
About a thing, and like one of the redundant phrases in that is parallel structures. What does that mean? Well, it means exactly this.
Building
it means
alternatives.
People building alternatives to the existing reality. One of the biggest alternatives that has occurred in our lifetime, of course, is cryptocurrency.
Absolutely.
Bitcoin. And that is evidence that not only does an anarchic infrastructure work and possible, but it actually is capable of replacing the existing paradigm.
Yeah, it does it better.
Without like a violent revolution. Right.
Well, there is violence, but it's by the government against the advocates of the cryptocurrency.
I think a perfect example of this is the taxi monopoly in New York City. So how was that overcome? Because that existed for generations and generations of just unbelievable prices that are being passed on to the consumers. It's unbelievably inefficient, and it was about as tyrannical as it could be in its own little niche.
Ride sharing technology came in and just upended the whole thing.
Exactly. The way of doing it was not to change the law. It was not to fight the owners of the taxi companies. It was not to fight the legislation or the enforcement of the medallion system. No, it was, let's just accomplish what this is accomplishing in a completely different way.
That whole situation is a fascinating one. The sort of the history of these ride-sharing services, we followed them pretty closely here on Free Talk Live. I want to make clear I'm no big fan of these mega corporate Uber, Lyft. I mean, they suck in their own ways.
And it is weird that there ended up being only two of them.
And I'm not suggesting
others, but
I'm not suggesting that this is where the technology ends.
Sure.
I'm saying that this was an entrenched power structure for many, many, many years.
Oh, yeah.
And the way of upending it was not through force, was not through politics.
They didn't
wasn't
ask
through
permission.
changing the laws.
That was what they got right. They didn't ask for permission. They just made the software and they put it into action and it started. And then before the government knew what was going on, because governments are slow, right? Like they're not known for their speedy service. They finally took them a while, but they figured out what was going on. The taxi cab people started complaining about it, and then regulations and controls came into place. And of course, these are corporate players, so they agreed, and they jumped through the hoops. In fact, they're even now writing the laws that apply to ride-sharing services, so they're corrupt too.
And this is where it really is all about a balance. So, like, some people are so upset about the tyranny that we're under that they want to take up arms against it, and I empathize with that very much. But I know that that's stupid.
It won't work. It's what they want you to do.
Now, there are other people who are like, well, let's just go along with it and make little changes, and that's too far in the other direction. The right way is to go this middle path where, like, you're not going along with it. You're not filling out the paperwork and becoming a corporation. And, like, it reminds me of a little interview with Elon Musk. Just a moment where they were talking about him starting to build a tunnel system. And he says, well, and he's in California, so you have to ask permission for everything because they monitor everything all the time. So what did he ask them for permission for? Oh, I want to dig a pit. Did he ask them for permission to build a giant tunnel system? No. He asked for permission to dig a pit. And you just go do the thing. Go do the one little thing that you can get away with.
Yeah, you can't fill it in. It's a tunnel through a mountain or whatever, right?
Exactly. So in the same way, like they didn't ask. And by the time the government got around, people were like, no, they've already proven that this is valuable to us.
There is a pseudo monopoly, and I say that because I can't think of another entity besides this one I'm about to mention that did what it did, and that is basically kill newspapers. Craigslist. Right?
For classified ads.
For classified ads. It took the idea of classified ads and put it online, using the network effect to its own benefit, put it online, and all of a sudden it took away literally the bread and butter of every newspaper in the United States of America, if not globally.
What percentage of a newspaper's revenue in the glory days were classified ads?
Most of it.
That was a lot.
Most of it.
Yes.
Wow. Your subscription basically covered the price of printing the thing and getting it out to you, but getting
and advertising.
But not even advertising.
Advertising actually covered most of the costs,
like paying the journalists.
Of the newspaper.
Exactly.
And like if you were a home subscriber and you got your newspaper every day, and some kid like chucked his newspaper at your door, whenever you paid him the $5, whatever that fee was, that just went to pay him.
Right.
That didn't cover the cost of printing and all that kind of stuff. What covered the cost of that was the advertising, but mostly the classified ads.
Was the moneymaker.
That's where they made the most money. And so when Craigslist took that away, all of a sudden newspapers were like, oh!
Now what? Yeah. And they are in trouble still, by the way. Big time. 603-283-6160. You can comment on disruptive technology. You want to share another example you can think of on a world-changing technology that we haven't mentioned? There's plenty of them, I'm sure. It's Free Talk Live. You can join us. Do you prefer to listen to Free Talk Live on your schedule on demand? You can find the link to our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com, which features the daily digest of our radio show 7 days a week. Just drop our RSS feed into your favorite podcast client or subscribe to us on the large platforms if you prefer, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartMedia, Spotify, and Stitcher. All the links are at feeds.freetalklive.com. If the daily digests aren't enough for you and you really don't want to miss a moment of Free Talk Live, you can always sign up for our AMPS Patreon at amps.freetalklive.com for just $5 a month, and you'll get the full radio show without recorded commercials. Plus, you'll help us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. That's amps.freetalklive.com to join AMPS, or feeds.freetalklive.com to get our main podcast, or find us on the major podcast platforms.
From Feature Story News, I'm Simon Marks with the Week in Review, and the week ended with the financial markets and currency traders roundly rejecting efforts by the new British government to strengthen the country's economy. A mini-budget unveiled by new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng sparked a crash in the value of sterling. The government's decision to unveil massive tax cuts in a bid to boost economic growth saw the pound fall to yet another 37-year low. Former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Bloomberg Television the worst is yet to come.
It would not surprise me if the pound eventually gets below $1 if the current policy path is maintained.
Earlier, the week witnessed the first face-to-face meeting between new British Prime Minister Liz Truss and President Joe Biden.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for welcoming me.
The public statements before the meeting were somewhat perfunctory.
And as you say, Mr. President, we are steadfast allies.
You're our closest ally in the world, and There's a lot we can continue to do together.
One thing they will not be working together on is a US-UK trade deal. The Prime Minister conceded it could be years before a post-Brexit transatlantic trade agreement is struck between the two countries. That meeting occurred at the United Nations, and there President Biden sounded the alarm over Russia's latest threats to Ukraine. He spoke to the world body hours after Vladimir Putin ordered the first partial call-up in Russia since the Second World War, and again threatened to use nuclear weapons in his quest to conquer Ukraine.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple.
On Friday, G7 leaders decried the Kremlin's efforts to hold referenda in pro-Russian areas of Ukraine, calling them a sham with no legal effect or legitimacy. Donald Trump had a difficult week.
We are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company.
New York's Attorney General Letitia James announcing she's suing the former president and 3 of his adult children for conspiracy. They're accused of falsely inflating the value of the Trump Organization's assets to secure loans on favorable terms. The week will be remembered more than anything else for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in London. World leaders gathered at Westminster Abbey for the service. The Queen was laid to rest later that night at Windsor Castle, from where FSN's Trent Murray reported.
This really was the final goodbye. The state crown, imperial crown, removed from her coffin, and that coffin lowered into the royal vault.
And the Queen now lies next to her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones open if you want to join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. Oops, sorry, Captain.
What's that number?
That is 603-283-6160. Ian here tonight.
People's Mountaineer.
And the silenced one, the captain.
Were laughing too much. I didn't want to put you on there, because then you have to explain yourself.
You don't have to make excuses.
You're laughing.
It's your show, man.
And I don't know what.
You press the buttons.
It's
fine.
BullionMax.com. That is where you can go to get some of the most stable assets in recorded history. You can get them, gold and silver, beautiful pieces, without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals will ship fully insured directly to your home. Right now, you can get their silver starter kit. And whether you're brand new to precious metals or you're old school, you've been doing this for a long time, you'll appreciate the Silver Starter Kit. It's got 5 ounces of the most desirable silver products that you can get. You can get only 1 per household at what they're calling employee pricing. So you get a discount if you go to bullionmax.com/FTL. That's FTL like Free Talk Live. bullionmax.com/FTL. Only 1 per household on the Silver Starter Kit.
You know, it occurs to me that I don't know that I've ever been in the first chair on a show with you in one of the other 2 chairs. I think whenever we've done a show, it's always been you in the first chair, if you're here, and me in, second or third chair or whatever. So, like bucket list, like put it in the back of your head. Maybe one day I'll be in the first chair.
I think that he is plotting to silence you in the way that you have silenced him.
What?
Now that might be projection on my part, because if I was him, I would definitely be plotting to silence you as I have been silenced before.
We can switch later on if you want, Captain.
It's fine. I'm not.
After the break.
By the way, you got a 3-hour-long first chair that you're going to be doing tonight called Beard Talk Live. That starts at 10:30 Eastern Time on our video streams over at, you can watch it at watch.freetalklive.com. That is our Odyssey channel. So join them there for that a little bit later. We'll remind you about that later, too.
And we'll have more beard tonight than we've ever had on any previous episode.
Do you guys feel like we've covered this disruption thing? Was there more you wanted to add into the conversation about disruptive technologies?
Always. I mean, so one of the things that I think is a very important conversation going on in New Hampshire is which disruptive technology is really worth our focus. Because, I mean, we know for a fact that this is how you change things. And I, for one, am wholly focused on the disruptive technology of economics,
Yes.
of having a new money system. Because the way I see it, absolutely every one of these power structures that is keeping us in a belittled state all comes back to reinforcing the power of the banks and of the ability to print money.
Sure.
So
if you're using their money, you're still losing.
Right.
Right.
Now, that being said, I also brook an argument that court system is right up there with really important things to start replacing. And the thing is, I mean, Bitcoin wasn't built in a day. This was an evolution over several attempts to create an electronic money system with no third party. And, it was attempt and fail, but every time they did, they got a little bit better. Okay, well, we can use this hash algorithm to secure it. Oh, well, here's the problem with doing that. Oh, well, here's the solution to that problem.
Here's privacy.
Right. And in the same way, if we're going to start doing a court system, it's going to have to go through the same, painful evolution where it's okay, how about this? Okay, well, that won't work because of this. How about this? Well, that won't work because of this.
Okay, I want to ask you specifically on that question or that issue of courts. We already know arbitration exists.
Yes.
That's not an unfamiliar territory for at least corporate America. If you look at a lot of contracts or terms of service, which aren't really contracts because they don't have offer and acceptance and all that, two parties, but they a lot of them have arbitration clauses in them.
So there's
already a lot of that.
So that is part of the developing technology. However, that is really just an offshoot of the very system that we're trying to replace. Because all of those arbitration providers are corporations. And corporations are something that exists solely as an extension of this legal system and the court system that goes with it. So this court acknowledges that court as an alternative.
I see.
And in that way, it's still a stunted step as far as an alternative system.
But we can learn from what they're doing because those systems already exist. We just need to be able to modify them in a way that's more voluntary. And we can also learn from the past, something human beings are loath to do.
Right.
We can learn from the past in things like the Irish had the tuatha, where they would have some sort of an elder respected in the community, somebody who was already successful, who was willing to voluntarily engage in dispute resolution. And so you could take this voluntary arbitration to a point where, well, if you can't figure out how to voluntarily settle your disputes, you can both agree to engage this third party who is loyal to neither person, right, who's respected by, the people in general, and say, hey, will you evaluate this dispute for us? So these things have been done in the past and are entirely able to be done in the future if we can just get the current thing out of our way.
Well, and so that's the question here is the current thing has many heads. There are many different parts of the coercive system that need to be replaced, and one of those heads is the courts. But but our time is limited. Our energy, our focus, these are limited resources. So there's definitely some dispute as to where we should start investing and in what order, because some advances will be completely impossible to implement until other advances have already been made.
Here's another place that human beings can learn from, and that's international contracts. Because as I see it, there's really not one centralized organization that governs international contracts.
Right.
If you're in a foreign country and you make a widget, and I'm in the United States and I want to purchase your widget, at a wholesale price or whatever, and you make it at a price, and we agree upon that, and we sign a contract between us, we have to stipulate in that contract that if a dispute happens, that we both agree to have that dispute heard by arbitrator XYZ, whatever that is. And there's no overseeing centralized governance unit that dictates what we must and must not do. That is all governed voluntarily by our agreement.
It's all in the contract.
Right. And so if you take a look at even international commerce between organizations, like, we can learn a whole bunch about how to settle arguments and how to arbitrate that stuff without any centralized organization of force known as governments.
And so these are all the pieces, right? So there's a piece of this solution that exists in the arbitration companies. There's a piece of this solution that exists in the international contract law. There's a piece of this that exists in the past in the way that we solved it as communities with Tuathas. But okay, so that one, for example, there are developments that we need to make to apply our modern technology because we simply have more people to deal with. But there are ways of doing that because we have ways of doing so many things so much faster. But it's going to take some focus and some time to figure out how to mesh these together.
Yeah,
Whereas,
it's tricky.
And in the same way, like with Bitcoin, so like there was the blockchain was part of the technology. There was the cryptographic security that was another part of the technologies, and there were like subparts of these different parts, and figuring out how to put them all together took time and a lot of focus.
Another thing you got to figure out is the funding aspect. I mean, with cryptocurrency, the money is obvious as far as the price could go up. If this thing is successful, it inevitably likely will go up. So simply holding on to the crypto can be a positive thing in that direction.
That's why I'm so focused on money, is because I think that's like the first thing you got to get for exactly that reason.
Like, the solution really is very simple. Much like a landlord who builds in the cost of water and sewer into the rental agreement for his tenants, you simply build the cost of these arbitrations into your original agreement.
Meaning you're like paying for a subscription with the arbitrator or something?
In the example that I gave earlier, if Peakless is in a foreign country and I'm here in the U.S. and we agree to a thing, the price that we agree upon has already had the price built in for arbitration. So it's already paid for just in the fact that we've agreed to it.
The number here, if you want to join us, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Whoever it is that decides to start this new thing, it's going to be pretty hand-to-mouth for a while. There's not going to be a lot of money in it, and that's why it's one of the more difficult things to accomplish. There's more coming up here.
We have some good news. The indictments against Ross Ulbricht in the District of Maryland were dismissed with prejudice, meaning they can never be refiled. This is especially good because those indictments contain the only charge ever made that Ross engaged in murder for hire. This was a serious allegation that Ross Ulbricht denies. It was never prosecuted or ruled on by a jury, but was trumpeted by the federal government and the media as if it were proven fact. The Maryland court held these indictments for almost 5 years, poisoning Ross's case and leaving him under a cloud of unproven allegations. As explained in Ross's appeal to the Supreme Court, the fact that the judge used these allegations to give Ross a draconian sentence of double life without parole violated his Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial. Judges are required to issue sentences based on convictions decided by a jury, not unproven allegations never even charged at trial. Although this is a positive development, the dropped indictment will not set Ross free. Now, a presidential pardon is Ross's only hope of freedom. Sign the petition at freeross.org. freeross.org.
So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
Phone records, financial and location data, Prism, Tempora, Xkeyscore, Boundless Informant. Hey y'all, Scott Horton here for offnow.org. Now here's the deal. Due to the Snowden revelations, we have a great opportunity for a short period of time to get some real rollback of the national surveillance state. Now they're already trying to tire us by introducing fake reforms in the Congress. And the courts, they betrayed their sworn oaths to the Constitution and Bill of Rights again and again, and can in no way be trusted to stop the abuses for us. We've got to do it ourselves. How? We nullify it at the state level. It's still not easy, but the Off Now project of the 10th Amendment Center has gotten off to a great start. I mean it. There's real reason to be optimistic here. They've gotten their model legislation introduced all over the place, in state after state. I've lost count, more than a dozen. You're always wondering, yeah, but what can we do? Here's something important, something that can work if we do the work. Get started cutting off the NSA support in your state. Go to offnow.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. We're talking about innovation. We're talking about disruptive technologies, how to get from where we are today, which is a coercive society, into one on a more voluntary basis. With you in the studio tonight, by the way, it is Ian.
Peakless Mountaineer.
And the Reverend Captain Kickass.
And by the way, I do want to say thank you to Igutski, who is a Free Talk Live supporter of our AMPS program. Igutski is contributing $5 a month over at amps.freetalklive.com to help us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live. If you appreciate the work that we do here, you like the ideas of liberty being talked about on the radio 7 nights a week, you can join the AMPS program as Igutski has done over at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. Normally we take calls on our regular phone number, 603-283-6160, but
do we have a special caller?
Rat Speed has called in tonight.
The Reverend?
Yes.
Wait, do we have room for 2 reverends at the same time?
We'll find out.
3?
We
4?
We already have multiple reverends.
4
here.
reverends?
Right. So this is the SIP line, as it is called. You can go to sip.freetalklive.com, sip.freetalklive.com. It is basically like an internet telephony system, and most of the time it sounds better than your typical phone call. Go ahead, Rat Speed. What's on your mind tonight?
Yes, Reverend, we must fight to the death. You take out your guitar or whatever, and I bring out my accordion. We'll see who finishes this.
A Weird Al meets Pantera sort of tribute?
Yeah, exactly.
Can this happen at the Porcupine Freedom Festival or Fork Fest next year? I think that'd be fun.
That would be fun.
Sounds like a good event.
So yeah, I wanted to bring up something that's been in the works and behind the scenes, kind of, and it's going to be a disruptive technology if it does catch on. It's called NewNet, as in GNUNET. Has anyone ever heard of this?
Is that like No GNUs is Good GNUs with Gary GNU?
It sounds like programmer-related. Programming.
Exactly. It's GNU, not Unix. It's something that's being put on by the Free Software Foundation and bunch of coders in Europe. About 9 years ago, they created a presentation to present to this for the first time called You Broke the Internet. We're making a new one, as in GNU. And what this does is it encrypts and obscures data going through the internet at the packet level. In other words, it turns the entire internet into a decentralized Tor-like network.
So this, I actually know about
idea.
this, but I just didn't know that's what it was called. So this is actually the technology that I believe the military-industrial complex released their network in order to avoid us from creating this.
Huh.
It's separate from what the Navy created. This is something that's
exactly.
Been put
I think
together.
I think that they released all of their all of the technology that they had developed so that would be just too easy instead of us creating a completely encrypted network on the base level.
Reverend, this sounds like several things have sort of made claims that sound like what you're claiming this technology does. One of the ones that I'm familiar with, at least slightly, I've heard about and read a little bit about, was an older technology that never really took off called MaidSafe.
I remember
and that. Was a massive array internet disk, secure access for everyone. And what they touted was that your personal data would be contained within sort of a sphere, and that you would be able to dictate who and when your personal data was released to any sort of organization at all. And so all of your personal data sort of, was contained within, they called it a sphere, but like, just imagine like a pod for your personal data online, a blockchain, something like that. And then whenever you did business with a company, if they were like, hey, we'd like to have your address, you could be like, okay, well, company B can have my address. Hey, we need to have your first name and last name. Okay, company C can have my first name and last name. You'd be able to dictate which parts of your personal data were accessible by these other companies. And this sounds very similar to what you're talking about.
It sounds like it might be centralized. You would have to go through like a specific company to do that. What NewNet does is it replaces the current TCP/IP packet data transmission, and it completely changes it around. So it encrypts it before default. It completely does it from default. So the moment that you're online, this would replace the current technology that makes the internet work.
Yeah, what you're talking about, Captain, sounds like it would be a lot easier to do with this. Because since this is encrypting all of your information in the first place, because that's the thing, that's where most of these companies get your information, is because you're sending it around unshielded all over the internet. So they pick it up there. They pick up, personal and non-personal information that way. Whereas if all of that information is being encrypted before it's even sent anywhere, then it's a lot harder for them to pick this up.
Yeah. You're talking about, just to clarify, Ratspeed, I mean, as much as we can on a general audience talk show, you're talking about one of the fundamental building blocks of internet and local networking, TCP/IP. Those are protocols. You're talking about a new protocol that would completely replace the TCP/IP, and it would be encrypted at the lowest possible level, meaning that every single data packet you're sending somewhere online cannot be viewed by the people who are passing it along. The router at your internet service provider, the 20 routers between your ISP and wherever it is that the packet ends up, they would not be able to inspect that data in any way, shape, or form. Is that right?
Correct, and it also obscures it like Monero.
Oh, nice.
I am a big fan. I know one of the things that cryptocurrency doesn't do that I wish it did was privacy by default.
Right. So speaking of cryptographically securing, I really want Radspeed's perspective on. So I was really excited about the library protocol because of its ability to provide an internet that was secured and uncensorable. So I'm curious about are you first off, are you familiar with the library protocol?
Familiar with it, haven't looked at the code, or I haven't looked at the white sheet or anything yet.
Okay, but you're at least aware of it. I'm curious, how that compares with just doing it from the very base level.
You wouldn't need to do it through what you were just talking about. This would replace it. So
library is just a file sharing protocol. Library is not at the level of TCP/IP. Library is operating above that, I guess you could say. He's talking about replacing the fundamental lowest level protocol transmission.
So the difference is so with something like the library protocol, it goes into the unencrypted protocol and then gets encrypted afterward, whereas this would just never go into the
I don't know if library is encrypted per se. I'm not sure about that. Library is a file storage system that's operating with a public blockchain. Okay. So I don't know if that's the case at all.
Then how would a blockchain fit into the GNU?
I don't think it does it?
It doesn't. No, this is not a blockchain at all.
Okay, gotcha.
No, we're talking about data transmission here. This is
Exactly.
So how would you do like DNS? How would you have like the www.blank brings me to here?
It's packet transmission.
Yeah, how would you?
That is a complex question.
Yeah.
And there are many. I would recommend to go on YouTube and look at some of the presentations that they've created. They get into the nitty gritty about it.
This is called GNUNet, the website gnunet.org. Is that the accurate site?
Well,
tell me this.
Just a quick yes or no. Would it be something where you could have like a one set of addresses that everyone can access?
I don't understand the question.
So, like anyone in America can type in www.google.com and go to the same site.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It works exactly the same, but it's just that no one can tell who, where the packet data is coming from, and it's basically it obscures it.
There are also alternative DNS systems that are being developed.
Yeah, you could change the settings where Google.com brings you to a different site.
Yeah,
if you're going by
there are
different,
decentralized.
That's actually a big. So there's this gets really technical. I'm not going to get to the deep parts about it, but the technology that creates the routing table for the entire internet has actually always been trust based.
Yeah, it's very centralized.
They did it back during a time before they realized that this was going to be a problem, like 20 years later.
Right.
So this addresses that.
Yeah, there's some interesting alternatives out there. They're usually like crypto based. There's one called Namebase. There's some others out there that are, none of them are really leading the pack that I've seen, but I think that's coming along, seeing decentralized DNS. But another question I had for you, Ratspeed, on this GNUNet is, where are they at with the development or the deployment of this? Is this available? Can I download this TCP/IP replacement and start interneting on this new system?
So if you run your own router and you have a top-level domain and things like that, you can. There's certain they're testing messenger clients and things like that. I sent you a Twitter link.
Nice.
I sent you a link in Twitter, and you can check it out. Their website. And I would highly recommend to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, well, I hope you'll let us know if there's any major developments where, non-programmer types, and thank you for the call tonight.
Thanks for the good news.
When can non-programmer types jump into this and just, install a thing and then start going, right?
Yeah.
Without having to do crazy configurations. Hour 2's coming up. Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Are you tired of your taxes funding endless occupations around the world? Antiwar.com is run by people who understand that wars abroad become wars at home, wars on our freedoms. Antiwar.com is dedicated to bringing you the latest in news, views, interviews, and reviews from the top movers and shakers in the anti-occupation movement. Antiwar.com has it all, from thorough foreign policy analysis to interviews with whistleblowers who used to run the military-industrial complex. Anti-war, pro-free market. That's antiwar.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next, after the news, here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News, I'm Simon Marks with the Week in Review, and the week ended with the financial markets and currency traders roundly rejecting efforts by the new British government to strengthen the country's economy. A mini-budget unveiled by new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng sparked a crash in the value of sterling. The government's decision to unveil massive tax cuts in a bid to boost economic growth saw the pound fall to yet another 37-year low. Former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Bloomberg Television the worst is yet to come.
It would not surprise me if the pound eventually gets below $1 if the current policy path is maintained.
Earlier, the week witnessed the first face-to-face meeting between new British Prime Minister Liz Truss and President Joe Biden.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for welcoming me.
Public statements before the meeting were somewhat perfunctory.
And as you say, Mr. President, we are steadfast allies.
You're our closest ally in the world, and there's a lot we can continue to do together.
One thing they will not be working together on is a US-UK trade deal. The Prime Minister conceded it could be years before a post-Brexit transatlantic trade agreement is struck between the two countries. That meeting occurred at the United Nations, and there President Biden sounded the alarm over Russia's latest threats to Ukraine. He spoke to the world body hours after Vladimir Putin ordered the first partial call-up in Russia since the Second World War, and again threatened to use nuclear weapons in his quest to conquer Ukraine.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple.
On Friday, G7 leaders decried the Kremlin's efforts to hold referenda in pro-Russian areas of Ukraine, calling them a sham with no legal effect or legitimacy. Donald Trump had a difficult week.
We are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company.
New York's Attorney General Letitia James announcing she's suing the former president and 3 of his adult children for conspiracy. They're accused of falsely inflating the value of the Trump Organization's assets to secure loans on favorable terms. The week will be remembered more than anything else for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in London. World leaders gathered at Westminster Abbey for the service. The Queen was laid to rest later that night at Windsor Castle, from where FSN's Trent Murray reported.
This really was the final goodbye. The state crown, imperial crown, removed from her coffin, and that coffin lowered into the royal vault.
And the Queen now lies next to her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. Wall Street will be looking to rebound in the coming week after the Federal Reserve continued raising interest rates but rattling global markets. On Wednesday, the Fed increased interest rates for a third consecutive time by 75 basis points. Previewing the week ahead from FSN's US business desk, Nick Harper.
Investors will get to weigh up the latest data on consumer sentiment and consumer spending. With the latter making up 2/3 of US economic activity, Wall Street will be watching closely, as America's willingness to spend may be beginning to be dented by the continued interest rate rises, leaving them less disposable income. Durable goods data, those big-ticket items, will also give a read on how confident consumers feel about making those outsized purchases, often on credit. And the coming week will also provide a look at the housing market with new and pending home sales.
Much of what happens on the markets will hinge on Britain's economic woes. With the pound spending the weekend at its lowest level since 1985, here's more of what former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers had to say about the situation in the UK. He spoke to Bloomberg TV.
Makes me very sorry to say, but I think the UK is behaving a bit like an emerging market turning itself into a submerging market. There's nothing in the pattern of market response in the UK that suggests anything but fear rather than confidence.
Other stories we'll cover in the week ahead. South Africa's energy crisis. There are more power cuts ahead there. And if you've got a telescope, you'll get your clearest view of Jupiter since 1963 as it makes its closest approach to Earth. And that is the Week in Review from Feature Story News. Simon Marks reporting.
A severe allergic reaction causes Florida to swell up to twice its normal size. And a Ford assembly line worker is thinking about asking out a cute welding robot from work. It's time for the weekly feature with over 14 subliminal and completely unapologetic cues to purchase Energizer batteries. This is the Onion Week in Review. Area man Brett Lucier told reporters Tuesday he was left winded after placing a particularly lengthy lunch order at a local Wendy's. A weary Lucier said he struggled to get through the 7-item order and even suffered a cramp while asking for the spicy chicken sandwich.
I thought I was just about done after I ordered that junior bacon cheeseburger, but I was able to get that Frosty in there too.
And in this week's op-ed pages, a local man talks about how he was always just one of those kids who was off by himself taking cats apart to see how they work. In your hands right now are the 24 AA Energizer lithium batteries you were subconsciously manipulated into purchasing. We make no apology. For more, visit theonion.com/newsbeat.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We are kicking off the second hour of the show. The phones are open. You can join us here, and the number is 603-283-6160. If we get the chance, we'll get into China and things like the social credit score coming to America, perhaps. With you in the studio tonight, it's Ian.
Beakless Mountaineer.
And some guy who's terrible at air drumming.
We talk about insider trading in D.C. as well. Some people have been caught red-handed, apparently. And the number here is 603-283-6160. But we're going to go to your phone calls and your thoughts. Plus, the war on drugs is in the news. But first, we've got Major Payne on the line in Michigan. Go ahead, Major.
Hey, Ian. Yeah, I just called to notify you that NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, is making you famous. You're almost in Florida. You are a hurricane.
Oh, I'm almost back in Florida.
Hurricane
again.
Ian or Hurricane Freeman?
I thought that...
No, Ian. Just Ian.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of the ones that was on the list of, like, we're not going to name them this anymore.
What
Apparently
what
not.
category are you?
I do not
question.
know.
I
How
don't
full
see
of
that.
hot air are you? That's the question.
I'm on one of the weather sites right now. I don't see what the category is. I'd like to apologize to my former Floridian neighbors for anything that I might do in the next week's time or however long it's going to be, few days. I don't
Are
know
you
when
sure
gonna
it's a hurricane? You're a hurricane and not just a
Apparently
tropical
it's a tropical
depression?
storm. It's a tropical storm right now. So, yeah, it's a bummer. There you go. Thanks.
I'd rather be a storm than a depression.
Yeah.
Well,
Anything else you want to share, Major?
Well, did you guys hear about those cops out in Colorado that killed that young fella?
Which one? I'm sure that's happened more than once, but...
Well, yeah, but this one kind of has some particulars to it. You remember when they handed out those shots? I don't remember what they called them, but they were to overcome the opioid overdoses.
Yeah, naloxone. What's the brand name on that one? I looked it up the other night.
It doesn't matter, but
yeah.
You know how the wheels of justice grind mighty slowly. I figure this took place about 2 years ago because the medical examiner just...
Uh-oh.
His name is now Minor Payne.
Major Payne.
Sounds like technical.
Man, he calls back fast. He's already there. Major, you're back. Something happened to your connection there.
Yeah, I dropped the damn phone and it closed up on me.
The brand name I was looking for is Narcan. Narcan. So for listeners that don't know, in some states, I don't know how many of them, I know New Hampshire is one of them, it is legal now to have Narcan. It used to be prohibited. You can now have this thing. It is basically, it kind of reverses the effects of a heroin overdose or an opiate overdose. They call it an agonist, I believe, is the term, the medical terminology for it.
It's not an antagonist, it's an agonist.
Basically, you can pull somebody out, kind of, or at least for a time. I think it's enough time to get them to a hospital or something like that. But you can sort of temporarily reverse the effects of a heroin overdose. As I understand it, that is, perhaps worse than a layman's understanding of it. Luckily, I don't spend much time around heroin addicts, so I don't feel the need to carry this with me. But people who are, for instance, family members, close relatives, friends, people who are around known heroin addicts, you want to have a dose or two of Narcan in the car or in your house or something like that. That way, you could administer that directly to the person. You don't have to wait on an ambulance, which by the time the ambulance gets there, the person may be in really bad shape.
So it's sort of the same kind of thing as like having a shot of adrenaline for a known allergy sufferer.
Perhaps, yeah. So, and it's legal in some states. Again, you'll have to check your local laws as far as whether or not it is there. So, how does this play into the story you were talking about, Major Payne, with the cops and some guy?
Well, like I said, the wheels of justice grind mighty slowly. So I figure this probably happened a couple years ago when they first issued these shots.
Mm-hmm.
Two cops are on patrol late at night, and they spot this young fellow walking down the road and decide to hoorah him. And then they say, well, he was acting funny, so they put him in a chokehold, knock him out, and then give him this Narcan.
Oh, God.
And he died. And the medical examiner just reversed the standings that it was because of being choked out and inadequate administration of the Narcan, or however he phrased it, is what killed him.
Hold on. So the medical examiner has confirmed that it was the Narcan and the choking that killed him?
Yeah, he reversed the findings to make such statements, yeah.
So the previous finding was he died due to the heroin, and now they're saying, no, it was what the cops did to him? Or was he not on heroin at all?
On heroin. He probably wasn't even high.
I see. Okay. Well, what was the medical examiner saying was the cause of death previously?
They did not get into all that. Like I said, this is. Okay. I think it took place in Aurora, Colorado. I'm not sure about the city, but I know it was Colorado.
Interesting.
I'm sure your magic rectangle could tell you more.
Thanks, Major, for the call tonight. I appreciate you bringing that forward. You know, maybe the cops just wanted to off this guy, and they said, oh, well, you know, he's known for being a heroin user, and let's just jack him up with this drug. And Uganda in our chat room at chat.freetalklive.com is saying it was ketamine that the person was allegedly on in this particular story.
Interesting. It is weird to hear that these so-called professionals, you know, are able to administer something like Narcan without medical oversight.
Well, I mean, you should be able to as well. This is available in New Hampshire, as I understand it. You can go to CVS or Walgreens or whatever and buy this stuff without a prescription, and you can have it on hand to administer it to somebody, and you might just save their life. And so, I'm sure there are cases in which people's lives have been saved here in New Hampshire because of this.
They're giving it to somebody who, you know, doesn't need it.
Well, that's a huge mistake, or they did it on purpose, right? One or the other.
So I kind of want to tie this into a previous topic of ours as far as the Buckminster Fuller quote about you don't win these things by resisting, but rather by replacing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that we, like I was saying, there are a lot of things that need to get done, and there's lots of arguments to be made as to which is the most important to do first. But on the list is certainly medicine. Like, we must get around the system's form of medicine. So, like, okay, look, if you want to have Narcan around, sometimes they're going to make it illegal for you to acquire it. And that's because you are relying on their system of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
You are relying on their doctors to decide whether you can be trusted with that chemical or not, which is absurd because I'm an adult, and I get to determine what goes into my body.
Here's the story, actually, according to, and thank you to Uganda in our chat room at chat.freetalklive.com for digging this one up. It was Elijah McCain, 23-year-old black gentleman who died after this confrontation with the police. According to the autopsy report now, it originally could not be determined his cause of death, but now they're saying he was injected with ketamine, not by the police, but by paramedics after being forcibly restrained. And the manner, let's see here, story, according to this, officers responded to a call about a suspicious person, put Mr. McLean, who is a massage therapist, in a chokehold, and paramedics later injected him with ketamine, a powerful sedative, after McLean had bought an iced tea at a corner store, said authorities. He died roughly one week later. Wow.
They
That's
are
horrible.
injecting people with sedatives
with
now?
ketamine.
That's crazy.
Jesus Christ. I mean, like, kneeling on your neck wasn't enough.
Yeah.
We have to start injecting drugs into people unwillingly.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's a crazy story. I mean, why that happened, I don't know. I don't know if there's any good explanation for this at all.
I cannot possibly think of a good explanation for why you needed to inject drugs unwillingly into someone.
One of the people who commented said, I don't think anyone can plausibly argue that if Mr. McLean had just been allowed to walk home that night, that he would have died. So, at least in some sense, the defendants, caused his death by the things they did from a legal point of view. According to the story at NBC News, McClain had come out of the store where he'd bought an iced tea when he was stopped by the police, responding to a call of a suspicious person wearing a ski mask and waving his arms. McClain usually wore a ski mask because of a blood condition that made him feel cold, according to his family. Officers questioned him and then grabbed him when one officer thought McClain was reaching for a holstered gun. They said the officers applied a carotid control hold on McClain, so a sleeper move, basically. Right. A type of chokehold meant to restrict blood to the brain to render a person unconscious. Paramedics called to the scene and injected him with ketamine to sedate him. Inside an ambulance about 7 minutes later, he didn't have a pulse and went into cardiac arrest. The report released later that year. According to the report, medics were able to revive him, but he was later declared brain dead and taken off life support less than 1 week later.
Wow. The police will determine the contents of your veins,
So
not you.
He was guilty of walking home with an iced tea from the corner store while black, basically. That's all he did. More coming up here. This is Free Talk Live.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Gold and silver. You can own the most stable assets in recorded history with BullionMax.com. Buy direct from BullionMax.com without talking to a salesperson, and your precious metals shipped fully insured direct to your home. Free Talk Live can get you their silver starter kit at employee pricing. Just go to BullionMax.com/FTL. It includes 5 ounces of the most desirable silver products. This offer's limited to 1 per household, so get yours now. Go to BullionMax.com/FTL.
I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
There are basically 2 types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. Phones are open. You can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Join us online. We get a lot of cool features on our website. You can head over to our social media platform at social.freetalklive.com, and you can interact there with other Free Talk Live listeners. Maybe you're tired of the big tech, mega corporate social medias out there and you want to have more freedom to express yourself. You can do that at social.freetalklive.com. It's Ian, Peakless Mountaineer, and Captain Kickass in the studio here tonight. Let's jump into some of the news, shall we? Yes.
I actually wanted to make another comment on the previous topic.
No, I'm sorry, you can't.
So,
what was the previous topic?
Kidding.
Oh,
which
you,
topic?
sir, are not in first chair.
We've covered many topics. Which topic?
The one we were just talking about with someone who looks like you seems to have robbed someplace. So we're going to kneel on your neck and then inject things that kill you.
Somebody who looks like Ian robbed a place?
Anyway, so one of the things that we also need to find ways around, like alternatives to. So, for example, I've used Cell 411 before, and never once has someone who arrived then kneeled on someone's neck and, shot them full of something that killed them without, say, having a trial or something first.
Yeah.
So this is why these alternatives are so important, is because as long as we rely on the monopoly to provide these services, they will be provided poorly.
Again, one of the reasons that I'm here in New Hampshire is because the folks who are involved with the larger freedom movement here, right, and that's encompassing everybody, right? The Free State Project, the natives who are already here, right? People who move here without signing a thing or whatever. They're just like, yeah, I'm freedom oriented, right? They come here and they want a better life. They want more freedom for themselves. They want freedom for in our lifetime. Is because people here are building, right? And to go back to the Buckminster Fuller quote, Cell 411 is a super important decentralized method of replacing things like 911, for example. And so building that alternative infrastructure is attractive to me.
For those that don't know, Cell 411 is a piece of software you can download for your cell phone, and it allows you to send out an emergency alert to your friends, people who are in your cell, people who might be living in the same town as you, for instance, that care about your welfare.
And you can have multiple cells.
Correct. Yeah, you could have a friend cell, a family cell, whatever people you want to put into the cell. And then you send an alert out saying, getting pulled over on this location. It's GPS coordinates, and then somebody who's nearby or relatively nearby could respond, and they can come and help you. Or maybe the house is on fire, or you're having some sort of medical problem. There's different alerts that you can send out. And
last time I remember using it was when I was being threatened. So being able
to the police?
Not by the police in this particular circumstance, just by
somebody else.
Yep, just regular street crime, not the usual mafia-esque government street crime. But yeah, I was being threatened. I hit Cell 411 and very quickly had someone else out there. Now, I had already diffused the situation by the time they got there, but it was a lot quicker than the police would have gotten there. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I don't know what the current status of the program is. Our co-host Nobody, who is going to be on, I think, Beer Talk Live tonight.
Last I heard, it seems to be working, but he's adapting it for iPhone users.
I was going to say, I don't know where the iPhone one is. Yeah. I think that one's, I don't know if it's totally broken or what's going on. Unfortunately, it's under development. If you are a programmer and you want to contribute to this thing, we have open sourced the code. What happened a couple years ago was the owner of Cell 411, the guy who originally started it, Virgil Viduva, a longtime listener and supporter here on Free Talk Live, he had some personal things he was going through in his life. He had to step away from the program, and rather than abandon it, He put it up for sale, and the Shire Free Church, which is the organization behind this program, purchased it and handed it over to nobody who he's been chomping at the bit to get back into programming. He's a programmer.
Yep.
And he's been cranking away on it for the last couple of years, minus the 6 months the state threw him in a prison cell for the Crypto 6 situation. So he's back at it. Hopefully we're going to see a release at some point of this, but he's a one-man band in this case, and that's not an easy thing to do. So the code has been open sourced. It never was before. That was one of the few valid critiques of Cell 411 before was, hey, code's not open source. I don't know what's going on in there. Well, now it is. And so if you're a programmer type, you can go to getcell411.com, or even if you're not a programmer, if you want to help test the builds that he's coming out with. If you think this is an interesting concept, maybe you're an old Cell 411 user and you want to get back in, you want to help out. He's releasing these, I don't know how often, but every now and then he'll release a new build of the thing. You can send your feedback. Just go to getcell411.com, click up on the menu, and there's a couple links to some chat rooms that'll connect you with people who are active with that. So
these things, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin specifically, and decentralized cryptocurrency, apps like Cell 411 that allow you to have a decentralized system to replace things like calling the paramedics, calling the police, right? To where you can call whoever you decide is the right team for the right situation. You have a cell that's like, police type danger. You have a cell for like medical emergencies. You have a cell for like, hey, let's go and have a party, right? You can have all these different cells that you designate to where, like, if you're having a thing, you can notify that cell of what's going on. These are very important to the forwarding of freedom, right? Because we're building, and by we, I'm not involved in really building any of this. I use this stuff, right? So, like, I'm a user, if you will, and I'm a fan of this type of stuff. But that's also one of the reasons why I'm here. We've talked previously about, like, what's the plan for the future? How do you see freedom coming about? Well, I see freedom coming about by concentrating freedom-oriented people in a geographic area who also are either builders or users of this new technology in ways that will replace the current existing thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing where it's really important to figure out what our order of operations is, and that's kind of a personal thing of, like, what is the most important thing to replace to me, so that we can start figuring out, okay, well, these people are going to work on these things, these people are going to work on these things, because all of these replacements have a lot of effort that needs to be put into them before they're ready for prime time, before they're ready to replace the people who are holding a monopoly over us.
Yeah, that's true, and we are on the very beginnings of all of this, right? And it'd be nice if we were 20 more years into it, but somebody's got to do the early work. Somebody's got to lay the groundwork, and in fact, a lot of the groundwork has been laid. I know tonight on Beard Talk Live, you guys are going to be joined by Zephin. He's in the studio hanging out with us here. He is one of the doers when it comes to the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. He was their top bill reviewer last year, got an award for it at their awards dinner this year, and much deserved. He blew everybody else out of the water. But the thing is, Zephin was able to come in here less than, I think, 2 years ago. He's a relatively new mover here to New Hampshire, and he was able to just plug himself in to a system that was already created, a system that is a very good and effective and working system, a system that there's an online component of when you read a bill, you can grade the thing based on how pro-liberty it is, and there's a whole like technological aspect that some programmer geniuses built, I don't know how many years ago, and have been improving over time. And then the whole, the structure, the board of directors, and they print out all these grades that they give all the state representatives every year. So this has been going for almost 20 years. So it's thanks to the different generations of movers that have come here over time that have all built on what has come before. More coming up.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
From Feature Story News, I'm Simon Marks with the Week in Review, and the week ended with the financial markets and currency traders roundly rejecting efforts by the new British government to strengthen the country's economy. A mini-budget unveiled by new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng sparked a crash in the value of sterling. The government's decision to unveil massive tax cuts in a bid to boost economic growth saw the pound fall to yet another 37-year low. Former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Bloomberg Television the worst is yet to come.
It would not surprise me if the pound eventually gets below $1 if the current policy path is maintained.
Earlier, the week witnessed the first face-to-face meeting between new British Prime Minister Liz Truss and President Joe Biden.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for welcoming me.
Public statements before the meeting were somewhat perfunctory.
And as you say, Mr. President, we are steadfast allies.
You're our closest ally in the world, and there's a lot we can continue to do together.
One thing they will not be working together on is a US-UK trade deal. The Prime Minister conceded it could be years before a post-Brexit transatlantic trade agreement is struck between the two countries. That meeting occurred at the United Nations, and there President Biden sounded the alarm over Russia's latest threats to Ukraine. He spoke to the world body hours after Vladimir Putin ordered the first partial call-up in Russia since the Second World War, and again threatened to use nuclear weapons in his quest to conquer Ukraine.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple.
On Friday, G7 leaders decried the Kremlin's efforts to hold referenda in pro-Russian areas of Ukraine, calling them a sham with no legal effect or legitimacy. Donald Trump had a difficult week.
We are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company.
New York's Attorney General Letitia James announcing she's suing the former president and 3 of his adult children for conspiracy. They're accused of falsely inflating the value of the Trump Organization's assets to secure loans on favorable terms. The week will be remembered more than anything else for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in London. World leaders gathered at Westminster Abbey for the service. The Queen was laid to rest later that night at Windsor Castle, from where FSN's Trent Murray reported.
This really was the final goodbye. The state crown, imperial crown, removed from her coffin, and that coffin lowered into the royal vault.
And the Queen now lies next to her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
This is Free Talk Live. The phones are open here. If you want to join in, live Saturday show, number 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Earlier in the show, Captain, I think, mentioned the upcoming conference, which is now 1 month from now. It's coming up fast.
Parallel structures.
October 21st through the 23rd. We'll be in Prague. We will not be. Mark Edge will be in Prague, I should say, our co-host, who should be coming back for a visit here in the next few days.
I think he'll be on Sunday.
Yeah, he's expected on tomorrow night. But eventually he's going to head out to Prague, October 21st through the 23rd, for what is the Free Cities Foundation's annual conference, which they call Liberty in Our Lifetime. The conference theme is Parallel Structures for Progress, and they're going to explore physical developments and parallel structures emerging in education and finance that offer alternatives for people looking for better ways to learn, educate their children, and invest in their future. If you like the idea of, for instance, Mark's ZE concept, the idea of the special economic economic zone. I think a lot of those people are going to be at this particular conference. So head over to lifetimeliberty.com. You can use code FTL20, and you can save 20% on the already discounted early bird tickets. Early bird tickets, by the way, that ends on October 3rd. So you're running out of time. If you've been procrastinating and you want to go to this thing, get yourself the discount. Use code FTL20 at lifetimeliberty.com. Let's go to the phones here. We have Good Cops and Unicorns calling from Alaska.
Is that one person or two?
Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hi. So Major Payne just called, I think, last segment about the story in Aurora, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is of the young gentleman who was walking home after having purchased an iced tea at the convenience store, was stopped by the police, put into a chokehold because they thought he matched the description of a suspicious person, and then subsequently he was injected with ketamine apparently by paramedics. And then he died. Essentially, his brain died, and then he was taken off of life support a week later. That story,
right?
Yeah,
right. And just I know I'm nitpicking a little bit, but I think Major Payne mentioned a couple times about the wheels of justice turning slowly. And
yes.
Just to clarify, I think that's the wheels of police accountability, and those don't turn at all.
No, they don't.
So,
are they really wheels to begin with?
Right, it's like the axle is welded solid to the frame or something. But
square tires, like the old DOS versions.
Yeah, but it very much reminded me of the Eric Garner case.
That was the man who was choked to death by a New York cop for selling loose cigarettes.
So I believe it was another carotid neck hold.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Anyway, so it's been a little pet peeve of mine as well on that, is that he actually was not selling loosies that day.
Oh, really?
And we've been hearing for, 10 years. I think that was 2012 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
And for 10 years, we've been hearing he was killed for selling loosies. But actually what happened was he wasn't selling loosies that day. He had just broken up a fight between like two guys on the street there.
Well, that'll teach him for doing the right thing.
Right. The cops rolled in.
Can you believe this guy making peace?
Exactly. And when they made a beeline straight for him, they knew who he was. He had been ticketed and arrested, I believe, many times for selling loosies. But if I remember the video correctly, what he was saying was, "Not today, guys. I'm not doing anything right now. You got nothing on me. Leave me alone. Leave me alone." Right?
They choked him out anyway. What you're saying?
They backed him up into that storefront. They all three, I think it was three officers were on him, and Officer Pantaleo was the guy who had him. Had him in the neck hold. Well, and of course they murdered him.
Well, and this shows you how dangerous to their structure creating any kind of an alternative is. Because that's the thing, like, no, you don't have the proper licensure to sell cigarettes.
You're going to need your tax stamps.
Exactly. You haven't given us our cut. Mm-hmm. It's like,
exactly.
Hey, I'm not selling anything. It's like, yes, but you sometimes do. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you are operating as an unlicensed tobacco shop means that we need to choke you to death.
And what's the term here that we've been using? Carotid
artery?
Carotid artery is...
No, carotid... No, the term for the chokehold.
Carotid hold.
Carotid hold, right? Okay. That, to me, is a BS terminology, because what you're really talking about is choking a guy.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Right? That's let's use the real term, the regular term that most people understand.
It's just a police action.
Right. It's not kinetic military action. It's bombing people. It's not a carotid hold or a carotid restraint. It's choking a guy.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and they're, I think the claim is that because they're not cutting off the airway, that it's less dangerous.
Jeez.
But
choking is choking. To me, I don't know about you.
Yeah,
well, if you won't let me stop the oxygen from getting into your body, you can at least let me stop the oxygen from getting to your brain, right?
Right. And Eric Garner was saying, I can't breathe for whatever the 2-3 minutes that it took for him to die. And, sure there are people out there going, oh, he can breathe because he's talking, which, of course, they've been saying that crap for a long time. But what really strikes me about that case is that even on like a show like Free Talk Live, where people are very serious about liberty and very careful about language, like understand what so-called law enforcement is, the tip of the spear of tyranny. Mm-hmm. And still we repeat that the lie that the NYPD created immediately after this case, that he was selling Lucy.
Well, to me, it's it's an interesting clarification, but ultimately irrelevant, because even if he was selling Lucy's, it doesn't deserve to being choked to death. It doesn't even deserve to be ticketed. You should leave somebody the hell alone if they're selling Lucy's. They're not harming anyone.
Or breaking up a street fight.
Yeah. So, to me, it's irrelevant.
I agree, but I think I'm just making up percentages here. 80% of Americans, when they hear, oh, well, he was killed by the police, but he was selling Lucy's.
Right.
So he was committing a crime. He should have done what they told him. They're able to rationalize or justify.
Well, you just should have been obeying the law. It's like he actually was obeying the law.
It is an illustration of the misconception that most people have about what a crime actually is.
Mm-hmm.
The original OG definition of crime was harm to an individual or property. If those two things are absent, no crime has been committed.
No victim, no crime.
Bam.
Yeah. Thanks for calling and clarifying that tonight. Anything else?
Can I say one? Yeah, real quick. I just want to say I think the important piece, I think, is that one could have looked much, much worse for the police. And maybe those, welded wheels of accountability for them might have turned just a hair on that if that narrative that the NYPD lied and got attached to that case wasn't allowed to happen. Meaning, if they weren't allowed to get away with saying, well, he was selling Lucy's when he actually wasn't.
They would have come up with something else.
It would have taken a little bit of wind out of their sails, though.
Yeah. To me, the footage of the dude kneeling on the guy's neck while staring off into space and just like kind of, I don't know, it didn't look like he was necessarily enjoying it.
Was that him or George Floyd?
Oh, no, I'm thinking of the wrong guy now. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, my bad.
The other guy who couldn't breathe. I'm sure there's been plenty of guys who couldn't breathe under the police.
It's easy to get them mixed up, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. And you're right. They do obfuscate the intentions, and they do make excuses for what they've done.
All they have to do is say, I thought he was going for a gun, and then they can get away with anything.
It's coming right for me. Yeah. South Park does
That's what they said about this other kid, the guy with the the ketamine injection that was killed by that. They said they thought he was going for a gun.
At me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like a kid who was a massage therapist who's walking home from the
I
corner
feared
store.
for my life from this guy who couldn't move.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for the call tonight, Good Cops and Unicorns. Definitely appreciate hearing from you. The number is 603-283-6160. Of course, you can bring up whatever you want. On the way, surprising news that the Colombian president has now spoken against the war on drugs.
What?
In front of the United Nations. He's breaking ranks.
Was he on drugs while doing so?
Maybe. I don't care. I think it's great news, and we'll talk about it here because what happened with Eric Garner and, was part of the war on drugs. More coming up.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, we can have a free market, a truly free market. Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
Looking for a great real estate investment? Consider New Hampshire, which is ground zero for the Liberty Movement. Your first call should be to Mark Worden from Porcupine Real Estate. He's more than just a real estate agent. He's your New Hampshire concierge. Where are the best places to live? Do you want farm, city, the burbs, or forest? Do you want a duplex or multifamily building so that renters pay your mortgage? There are homes in all price ranges in New Hampshire, and Mark can help with financing too. Invest in Liberty and property. Mark Worden can help.
PorcupineRealEstate.com.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
Email is easy, instant, and free, and that can be real embarrassing. Email lacks the eye contact and body language you get in face-to-face conversation, or the tone of voice and other nuance you hear in a telephone conversation. Email is just words, often few words. We're all smothering in spam, so we often reply in terse fashion that's easy to misunderstand. And email doesn't cost you a postage stamp, and it lacks the deliberation time it'd take to walk to the snail mail box, so it's easy to succumb to the "oh yeah" stimulus response trap. When in doubt, don't snap back at snippy messages you get. You may have mistaken the sender's intent. And unless you're sending AOL to AOL, there's no unsend. For more tips on critical communication skills for the way things are now, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
Have you had enough of the big-name web hosting services that are long on promises but short on bleeding-edge features, uptime, and customer service? Try Agorist Hosting, the agile web host that offers full concierge service from website redesign, full e-commerce solutions, custom apps for your Shopify store, IPFS integration, and more. Agorist Hosting is ready to take your web presence into the future. To get started, head over to agoristhosting.com.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, phones open. You can join us here. It is the live Saturday show, and the number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian.
Beagles Mountaineer.
And the Lord Reverend Dr. Captain Kick-Ass Reverend... Wait, what's the rest of my name? Buckshot Esquire, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
You can check him out. What's the website?
CaptainKickass.com.
That's right. It is online finally.
Only cost me $600.
Yeah, but it's worth it.
It's
right?
totally worth it. Yeah, I'm like I will have that forever now. I mean, it cost me $600 to acquire it. Now I only need pay the annual fee to keep it. Yeah. So.
All right, join us online anytime. Just head over to freetalklive.com and enjoy the various features we have for you there. You can download the show directly. You can subscribe to our podcast as well. If you go to feeds.freetalklive.com, you'll find a link there to the official podcast.
Can I brag for just a minute? Because we were just talking about it.
Yeah,
so
sure can.
I've been working on this song. It's called It's Time.
I heard it last night.
You did?
Yeah.
And I've been working on the mix and, all that kind of thing. And...
You've been working on this for a little bit.
It's like a year in the making, right? To me, it's I don't know, maybe the best thing I've ever done.
Wow.
I don't maybe
okay.
It's hard to tell. But
hey, the fact that it's maybe the best thing you've ever done means you're doing it right.
Yeah. I really like it so far, And what I've done is at this year's Pork Fest, during the Pork Fest picture.
That's the Porcupine Freedom Festival, the Free State Project's yearly summer camping festival.
Yes. Every year they get everybody together, the couple thousand, 2,000-3,000 people, whatever it is, or they try to invite everybody onto the hill and take a big old picture.
Right.
With all of the freedom-loving people that are there. And so I thought, maybe I can get everybody to yell, "We will not comply."
Nice.
A bunch of times. And I brought some field recording equipment, and I set it up in the field, and then I also had a handheld device as backup, and I was able to record.
How many times do you actually have field recording done in a field?
Right? It's like, have you used a duct tape on an actual duct? I've only done it once in my life. But so, yeah, I'm field recording in a field with arguably, 1,500, 2,000 people.
A lot of people.
There were supposedly 3,000-ish people at Pork Fest. Not all of them came down to take the picture. So
you can't wrangle
maybe
libertarians.
half of them. So arguably, 1,500, 2,000 people or so.
Right.
We're all hanging out and chanting, "We will not comply." And so I was able to take and record that and sort of put it onto the loop. And so at the end of the song, however many people joined the picture for Pork Fest of 2022 are part of this song.
Oh, that's cool.
It's your song. You're in it.
That's pretty
so
cool.
it's, sure, the music's mine and the lyrics are mine, and I did most of the stuff except for I programmed the drums, but it's not, me actually playing the drums. But it's coming along. It's pretty good, and I'm going to attempt to commission somebody to do a music video for it.
That's awesome. So maybe next year?
I'm hoping to have it done and released like either at or just before Pork Fest.
Okay.
This next one, or Fork Fest.
Seems reasonable.
Fork and Pork, because Fork Fest is now in front of Pork Fest.
Right. Cool. Looking forward to it. And I imagine you'll post a link and let us know at CaptainKickass.com.
It'll be there.
All right. So here's the news from the dailymail.co.uk. Colombia's president has declared that the, quote, "the war on drugs has failed," unquote, using his first address to the United Nations General Assembly.
Is this just his excuse to do lines in the office?
I don't care what it is. It's great to hear something like this coming from any high-ranking government bureaucrat, politician. I'm sure he's a terrible person, just like every president is. But every now and then a broken clock strikes right. So I'll give credit where credit's due.
Right.
In this case, he spoke and suggested sweeping changes to the nation's drug laws that could end in the legalization of cocaine. Gustavo Petro, a former guerrilla fighter and the first left-wing president of the Latin American nation, was inaugurated as president last month. He campaigned on a pledge to unite the deeply divided country, promising to fight against inequality and climate change, and achieve peace.
His name is really Petro?
Petro, in a South American, Central American, country.
Okay, all right.
Colombia says he wants to achieve peace with leftist rebels and crime gangs. Colombia is the world's largest producer of cocaine, accounting for 64% of the drug. All of it in 2019, according to the latest UN report. It's the source of more than 90% of the drug, which is seized in the U.S., and is home to the largest Drug Enforcement Administration office located overseas. And, of course, it's worth pointing out that he is absolutely correct about this. The war on drugs is an absolute failure. Drugs has not been eradicated. Drugs have not been eradicated. Drugs have not been lessened over time. There are more drugs now, and harder drugs, than there have ever been in generations' time. There's as many drug addicts now as there were prior to the war on drugs. So by all metrics, and we're not even talking about the tremendous number of, trillions of dollars that have been spent trying to fight this so-called war on drugs, from whatever numbers, statistics you want to look at, the war on drugs is an abject failure.
I just think it's hilarious that the excuse to make money is climate change in his country, whereas the way that you got a climate bill passed in our country was to say that it was to make money.
Wait, what do you mean?
Okay, so the bill that they passed to fight inflation did absolutely nothing of the sort.
The Inflation Reduction Act,
exactly, exactly. That was the and
they're going to fight inflation by spending $800 billion.
Right. Well, and in his next address, he refers to the thing as the largest environmental bill that's ever been passed.
Biden did,
which it was. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's hilarious that in my country, you have to pretend to be making money in order to do the climate change agenda. Whereas in his country, you have to pretend to be doing the climate change agenda in order to do the thing that's going to make you money.
The war on drugs launched by Richard Nixon in 1971. It's amazing it has been now 50 years. And, of course, it really started earlier with the prohibition of cannabis in the 1930s, but they didn't call it the war on drugs until Nixon. It massively ramped up under Reagan in the 1980s, cost the U.S. over $1 trillion, and has yet to fail, as yet has failed to reduce drug use. U.S. overdose deaths rose by 15% last year.
Right.
Petro campaigned on a new international strategy to fight drug trafficking, saying the U.S.-led war on drugs has failed. Quote, "It's time for a new international convention that accepts the war on drugs has failed, that it has left 1 million dead Latin Americans during 40 years, and that it leaves 70,000 North Americans dead by overdose each year," he said in his speech. The war on drugs, he said, has strengthened mafias and weakened states. I don't know if it's weakened states. I mean, they seem to be as powerful as ever, but it certainly has strengthened mafias.
Mafia states, but we repeat ourselves.
Right.
Jonathan Feiner, the White House Deputy National Security Advisor who met with Petro before his inauguration, said at the time, quote, "The United States and the Biden administration is not a supporter of decriminalization."
Now, on the point of states, though, so in his case, that's correct because
in Colombia's case,
yes, yeah, the nation of Colombia and the national government of Colombia was weakened at the expense of the CIA. So the drug trade as it currently exists, it's run by the Central Intelligence Agency primarily. It fuels all of their black book budgets, and yes, they absolutely undermined the national sovereignty of Colombia.
That's a good point.
So that power could then shift to an agency of the national government of America.
Well, and it is definitely true, from what I understand, in a lot of the Southern and Central American states that the drug cartels have a lot of power. I mean, there's no doubt about it that they, in many cases, have control over the actual states there.
From a Los Angeles, heavy metal band perspective, these lyrics I first heard to me, 15, 20 years ago. Still true. And when I heard them, I was like, is that true? And I had the internet and I looked it up. But the lyrics are, "All research and successful drug policy shows that treatment should be increased and law enforcement decreased while abolishing mandatory minimum sentences."
Who's
System of a Down.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it's absolutely correct.
Yeah. And I heard those lyrics and I was like, hey, who uses intellect in their lyrical content? And then I was like, oh, these guys do. Okay, great. And then I was like, wait, is this true? Does all research and successful drug policy show that treatment should be increased? And then I go online and I look and yeah, absolutely. Literally all of the places that have decriminalized or legalized drugs and increased treatment have shown that is the successful way to go about combating drugs, not policy, not the war on drugs, quote unquote, not state intervention, not more jail time, not more punishment, but treatment. The people who suffer from addiction need treatment, not punishment.
And any country that engages even lightly in democracy will be run by whoever has the money. And the more laws there are against this, the more money there is going to be in it.
We're going to continue.
So if you want them run by cartels, keep it illegal.
Your calls and thoughts are welcome here. The number is 603-283-6160. We'll find out a little bit more about what the Colombian president has to say. Again, he's probably wrong about a lot of stuff, but this one seems to be right so far. We'll dig a little deeper in hour 3 coming up.
Are you tired of governments around the world killing innocent people? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin is money that cannot be inflated or controlled by any state. By continuing to use their money, you're perpetuating the killing. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available to you now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at Bitcoin.com. It's Bitcoin.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News, I'm Simon Marks with the Week in Review, and the week ended with the financial markets and currency traders roundly rejecting efforts by the new British government to strengthen the country's economy. A mini-budget unveiled by new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng sparked a crash in the value of sterling. The government's decision to unveil massive tax cuts in a bid to boost economic growth saw the pound fall to yet another 37-year low. Former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Bloomberg Television the worst is yet to come.
It would not surprise me if the pound eventually gets below $1 if the current policy path is maintained.
Earlier, the week witnessed the first face-to-face meeting between new British Prime Minister Liz Truss and President Joe Biden.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for welcoming me.
Public statements before the meeting were somewhat perfunctory.
And as you say, Mr. President, we are steadfast allies.
You're our closest ally in the world, and there's a lot we can continue to do together.
One thing they will not be working together on is a US-UK trade deal. The Prime Minister conceded it could be years before a post-Brexit transatlantic trade agreement is struck between the two countries. That meeting occurred at the United Nations, and there President Biden sounded the alarm over Russia's latest threats to Ukraine. He spoke to the world body hours after Vladimir Putin ordered the first partial call-up in Russia since the Second World War, and again threatened to use nuclear weapons in his quest to conquer Ukraine.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple.
On Friday, G7 leaders decried the Kremlin's efforts to hold referenda in pro-Russian areas of Ukraine, calling them a sham with no legal effect or legitimacy. Donald Trump had a difficult week.
We are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company.
New York's Attorney General Letitia James announcing she's suing the former president and 3 of his adult children for conspiracy. They're accused of falsely inflating the value of the Trump Organization's assets to secure loans on favorable terms. The week will be remembered more than anything else for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in London. World leaders gathered at Westminster Abbey for the service. The Queen was laid to rest later that night at Windsor Castle, from where FSN's Trent Murray reported.
This really was the final goodbye. The state crown, imperial crown, removed from her coffin, and that coffin lowered into the royal vault.
And the Queen now lies next to her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN. Wall Street will be looking to rebound in the coming week after the Federal Reserve continued raising interest rates but rattling global markets. On Wednesday, the Fed increased interest rates for a third consecutive time by 75 basis points. Previewing the week ahead from FSN's US business desk, Nick Harper.
Investors will get to weigh up the latest data on consumer sentiment and consumer spending. With the latter making up 2/3 of US economic activity, Wall Street will be watching closely, as America's willingness to spend may be beginning to be dented by the continued interest rate rises, leaving them less disposable income. Durable goods data, those big-ticket items, will also give a read on how confident consumers feel about making those outsized purchases, often on credit. And the coming week will also provide a look at the housing market with new and pending home sales.
Much of what happens on the markets will hinge on Britain's economic woes. With the pound spending the weekend at its lowest level since 1985, here's more of what former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers had to say about the situation in the UK. He spoke to Bloomberg TV.
Makes me very sorry to say, but I think the UK is behaving a bit like an emerging market turning itself into a submerging market. There's nothing in the pattern of market response in the UK that suggests anything but fear rather than confidence.
Other stories we'll cover in the week ahead. South Africa's energy crisis. There are more power cuts ahead there. And if you've got a telescope, you'll get your clearest view of Jupiter since 1963 as it makes its closest approach to Earth. And that is the Week in Review from Feature Story News. Simon Marks reporting.
As of today, the average cost of a pack of cigarettes has gone up to 2 hand jobs and a stick of beef jerky. For more, we go now to Onion News Network prison economics expert Hal Rogan.
The prison economy runs on cigarettes. They're involved in every economic transaction at some stage, from contract killings to naked woman picture acquisition.
Right.
That's why we've got shampoo at 6 batteries. We've got tattoos at 50 commissary stamps.
Now, for what it's really like out there in the market, let's check in with major cigarette trader Big Dap Ramirez. Big Dap, nice to see you again.
Thanks, Rick. Good to see you. What's happening, Hal?
How's it going, Big Dap?
Now, it's obviously a boom time for cigarettes right now.
I'm getting a lot of hand
But with
jobs.
prices this high, analysis shows you're going to be seeing a drop-off in real sales soon as consumers turn to smoking grass fajos.
Look, we've been through this before. The market teaches us not to panic. But if I learn anything in this game, it's that a wife or girlfriend will pass off a few decks in the boneyard. Supply will normalize, and we'll see cigarettes returning to a single hand job or less.
Big Dap, best of luck to you. We'll keep checking in on the story with Hal throughout the day.
Thanks, Rick.
Moving on to some happier news. In Atlanta today, 2 snitches were beaten to death.
This is the Onion News Network.
Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, kicking off the third hour here, live Saturday show. As always, you can join us.
Join us.
The number, 603-283-6160. We are sharing, you can, or you can just listen to us. We'll talk about the war on drugs tonight, which is a topic that is something that I've always found to be interesting and outrageous. And
people learn from the past that people seldom learn from the past.
Yeah, and this has been going on now in the United States at least since 1971 in
before
full-on, well, yeah, but the quote-unquote war on drugs.
When it was the term was first coined, sure.
Yeah. I mean, they were eradicating marijuana before that.
And prohibition, alcohol, all that
prohibition.
crap.
Yeah, and alcohol prohibition never ended. It just changed form. They just went to a regulated model of total control. You still can't make your own alcohol and sell it without asking for permission, so it's still prohibited in that way.
It ain't moonshine if you're paying taxes on it.
Exactly. So, but the surprise news here is that of all places, the president of Colombia, who's newly elected, has taken to the United Nations to give a speech where he actually said that the war on drugs has failed. Now, the question is, what is he going to do about it?
My question is, did he say the war on drugs has failed, or did he say the war on drugs has failed, man?
I don't know. They didn't quote that last line, but he did apparently say the war on drugs has failed. We're going to continue with the story here with you tonight.
I would like to point out that he is from Colombia, not Kush, India. So, you know.
By the way, it is Ian here.
Peakless Mountaineer.
And the captain.
So the man's name, which, as you pointed out, Captain, is relatively amusing. His name is Petro. Last name Petro, first name Gustavo.
Gotta oil that guy up.
Former guerrilla fighter, and he's a lefty.
Wait, what do you mean? Bombs. He fights gorillas?
I don't know. I'm sure no one's ever heard that one before. But Petro took the message to the global stage, telling the annual gathering of the UN in New York that an urgent rethink was needed. The veteran congressman said that humanity's addiction to irrational power, profit, and money has been more damaging than drug addiction. Quote, "What is more poisonous for humanity, cocaine, coal, or oil?" he asked the assembly. He said further, the opinion of power has ordered that cocaine is poison and must be persecuted, while it only causes minimal deaths from overdoses. But instead, coal and oil must be protected, even when it can extinguish all of humanity.
Coal and oil.
And I don't know if I agree with him, necessarily about those statements, but I certainly agree with him.
Don't you know we're only 6 months from annihilation?
Oh, you mean ecology or whatever?
Exactly. Yeah. The once the water level rises past a certain point, we all die.
Didn't what was his name? Gore? Didn't he predict everybody was going to die by 2012 or something like that?
Screw that guy.
And then they predicted everyone's going to die by 2020.
Screw his wife, too. And I don't mean like screw. I mean like F them, but I can't say that on the radio.
Petro's predecessor, conservative Ivan Duque, warned that Petro could legalize all drugs and possibly threaten the United States. Duque said Friday, quote, "What worries me is there is now the possibility of getting into the permission or the legalization of cocaine and consumption." He said, "I think that will be very bad for Colombia and that it will be very bad for the countries in the hemisphere, and I think it could generate also a major security threat to the United States."
Translation, you can't make decisions for yourself. We will make them for you.
Yeah, what exactly is the security threat of legalized cocaine in Colombia?
Well, that's obvious, isn't it?
No.
I mean, the CIA can't have a black budget if cocaine is legal in Colombia. How is the CIA supposed to control drug trade if it becomes legalized?
That's something else they should do, is kick the CIA out of Colombia. No
well,
mas.
Don't you see what a threat that is to the security of the United States, Ian?
I see what you're saying there. Colombia's Justice Minister, Nestor Osuna, has insisted cocaine will remain illegal and that the so-called authorities will continue to try to halt exports of the drug. So, doesn't sound like they really understand the whole idea about the war on drugs has failed. But nonetheless, he also said that authorities, so-called, are going to target the mafias who export the final refined product, as well as the people who help them launder the proceeds. Felipe Tascon, the drug czar of Petro, said they plan to put an end to aerial spraying and the manual eradication of coca, which critics say unfairly targets poor rural farmers. He said that regulating the sale of cocaine would wrest the market from armed groups and cartels.
Wait, I have a question. Is the plant that eventually turns into cocaine, is that
the coca plant
able to be grown in the United States?
Of course.
No? Not effectively.
Really?
No.
Even though there's plenty of tropical growing area
what about
here?
Like greenhouses? Like people can grow marijuana.
Is it
like
possible? Is it possible? Yes.
Okay.
Is it effective? Is it cost effective? Not even remotely. So coca and sugarcane are two of those plants that absolutely require like a very specific tropical environment.
So Hawaii could grow coca?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
What about Florida?
No, actually.
No.
It's I know it requires just a very even Florida has too much of seasons for those plants. It would destroy whole crops of them. And the thing is you can do this in controlled settings like a greenhouse, but you can't make a greenhouse that is the size of a field.
I don't know.
You can if you bury it underground.
I mean, aren't they doing a ton of...
Is it possible?
So I've been told.
Well, aren't they doing a ton of marijuana grow indoors?
Oh, yes. Marijuana grows everywhere.
Right.
Like you can accidentally grow it anywhere.
Yeah.
Like they call it weed because it is a weed.
But the whole idea behind an indoor grow is you have total control, or as much control as possible, over the growing.
And the thing about that is that you can grow small amounts that way, and it'll still be cost effective. Whereas with cocaine, they want to grow fields of this stuff. So and you just can't afford a greenhouse setup that is that large.
True story. A friend of mine was at another friend of mine's parents' house as a pre-18-year-old person and had some marijuana, and it was seedy, right? Because this is way back in the day when that's all you could get.
I remember that.
And like because the parental units were on their way in, they just sort of chucked it over the deck, right, the edge of the deck or whatever, into the area. It's sort of a foresty area. Yeah. The next year, somebody came by and they were doing some sort of inspection to like put an addition on the house or whatever, and some sort of authority person was like, "Hey, do you know you've got marijuana plants growing in your yard?" So like the seeds, the little piece of it with the seeds, like had just randomly sprouted and grown in their yard, and they kind of almost got in trouble, but they didn't like get any like official trouble. But what I'm saying is, yeah, you can't just accidentally throw some cocaine seeds over the deck of your friend's house and next year grow some cocaine.
Right.
That's a good point.
No, they're night and day, those two plants.
Yeah. And there's a lot of processing that has to go into turning the coca plant into cocaine, as I understand it as well. Yeah. It's not just going out and picking buds off the plant. But so to their credit, this is again the drug czar who's speaking now in Colombia, the new drug czar. So they want to end aerial spraying and manual eradication of coca. He says that regulating the sale of cocaine would wrest the market from armed groups and cartels. So they're talking about potentially legalizing it within Colombia, but still prohibiting its export from Colombia. So they're halfway there. Drug traffickers, he says, know that their business depends on it being prohibited.
Well, so that part actually makes sense to me because other countries have laws against that. So I mean, since you're not legally exporting it as a country, you can't just slap a tax on that and look the other way. Because the other countries where it's getting exported to will go, hey, you're not allowed to just let them ship that out. That's illegal in my country.
What would their GDP look like if cocaine was legal within their country?
It's going to go up.
Right. And would cocaine be like their leading export product?
It probably would be.
Well, it sounds like they still wouldn't be able to legally export it.
So, okay, but here's the question.
Currently it already is their leading export product.
Right. So what I'm saying, if quote legitimately, like if the state were like, okay, this is legal now, like wouldn't that be like a more solid position for them as a country to have this legalized and like look at what we did, we increased our GDP by X because they currently can't claim that?
Well, no, actually, because the other countries that are receiving it can't do so legally.
Yes.
And because of that, they would complain in the UN, and there would possibly be sanctions against Colombia because, hey, you're letting them ship this contraband into my country.
What happens when the second country legalizes cocaine? Then Colombia can say
both of their GDP will skyrocket.
Colombia can then say, all right, you can export, but only to whatever the second country is that has legalized it, and that would be a huge boon for them. There's more coming up here. You can join the show. The number 603-283-6160. Are they going to move in this direction? Seems optimistic. Hope so. More coming up.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
Do you feel like your nation, state, or community no longer holds your values? Have you dreamt of a place where people agree that liberty is important and are free to pursue their projects so long as they respect the property of others? There are many people just like you that are discovering freeprivatecities.com. Their social media links are at the upper right of the page at freeprivatecities.com. All skill levels will be needed when the first of the Free Private Cities opens. It's sooner than you think. Stop arguing and build. freeprivatecities.com.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount.
Free Talk Live.
Now, in the light, there was a being. He started to moonwalk.
Are you saying Michael Jackson has come back from the alien spaceships?
And he said, I am Michael Jackson.
See, I called it.
There we go.
You talk with God throughout your life. You heard this voice that you recognized as God telling you, do you believe in magic, inviting you to look out the window, where you then saw Michael Jackson coming down from a rainbow ray of light coming from the sky. So what happened then? Did he, invite you to his playland or whatever it is he has?
9 months later, the virgin birth happened again.
Wouldn't that be ironic?
A lot of things happened that night. He asked if he could resurrect himself inside of me. I'm like, yeah.
You called it. Did you have Michael Jackson's baby?
I had Michael Jackson.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
Should you be able to earn an honest living free from senseless government interference? The Institute for Justice thinks so. That's why we've spent years defending hard-working men and women from pointless government regulations. Nationwide, IJ has created opportunity by reducing government power, but there is still more work to be done. Visit our website today at ij.org. Let IJ take care of the government so you can take care of your business.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open. You can join us here. We're talking about the war on drugs, but you can bring up anything you want. The number is 603-283-6160. Colombia possibly to legalize cocaine, but only within Colombia, according to the story here at the Daily Mail. There's a new president. He's a leftist, so he's probably terrible on most economic things and other issues. But he's absolutely right that the war on drugs has failed, and that's what he said in a speech recently at the UN.
We criticize all the time how little governments actually accomplish and get done, even within their own stuff, right? Mm-hmm. They're not out to set you up for more freedom and stuff like that, but they're slow. It takes them a long time to get things done. Imagine how much they would get done if they were all doing lines.
We're going to go back to your phone calls and thoughts here. Just a little bit more. In fact, they get to the point that you were making, Picos, about the international agreements and such potentially being violated by exporting cocaine. So they are going to continue to prohibit the export of cocaine, presuming this plan moves forward. And it's getting major headlines here. But the drug czar for the new president there, Mr. Petro, the drug czar's name is Felipe Tascon. He says drug traffickers know their business depends on it being prohibited. If you regulate it like a public market, the high profits disappear and the drug trafficking disappears. He says the government's program doesn't talk about the problem of drugs. It talks about the problems generated by the prohibition of drugs.
Why does that have to be regulated at all?
Well, I agree with you there, but you know how government people are. They want to have control. That's what they want to do.
They want their cut.
Well, and no, there is actually a reason that it has to be regulated. I don't like the reason, but it's true. The reason is this scares people. It scares people. So if you regulate it, it will scare them less. I don't like that's a fact, but that is how people operate.
I just don't like he's making it as if it's a either or choice, a binary choice, and it's they never mentioned the choice that we could just not regulate it at all.
Well, that's not realistic.
That's because they're not libertarians.
Let the market decide.
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to. So it is possible in New Hampshire to just legalize something, and there's enough of us that aren't absolutely terrified of it that that's a real thing that could happen.
But that hasn't even happened yet with cannabis here in New Hampshire,
Right.
because when you start talking about it, the prohibitionists still come out of the woodwork, and they're still saying things like, what about the children?
What
you
is it,
can't.
September now? I think in October we're going to be able to drive across into Vermont, and recreational marijuana stores will be open.
And they're already open in Maine and in
the
Massachusetts.
surrounding states.
Right.
Every state surrounding us.
I mean, it's going to happen at some point, but
Is it?
it does need to happen without taxes and without regulations. We have the best
Live
chance.
free or die, except for when it comes to marijuana.
Yeah, I mean, we have the best chance at that becoming a reality in New Hampshire, but also we're not there yet. The Free Staters don't control the legislature. As much as the Democrats want you to believe that the Free Staters are in total control of the legislature, they're not. No one has proposed this.
But even so, like, the Democrats should be in favor of recreational marijuana on some
Not if
level.
it's proposed by
They
the
used
Republicans.
to be. They used to be.
So they say here, if Colombia were to legalize the drug, and by the way, this is the Daily Mail reporting, if they were to legalize cocaine unilaterally, that would violate international agreements and cause a breach with the U.S. and other countries, according to the former congressman from a coca-producing region who founded a group that would promote sustainable development. The pariah status that would create for Colombia would likely harm their ability to trade and even access the global financial system. And yet the speculation...
Adapt and overcome.
Well, they don't want to do that. Yet still, the speculation remained that Colombia would follow the example set in the Americas by Canada, where cocaine is decriminalized, in British Columbia and Argentina, where it is legal for personal use. At present, Colombians can legally possess...
Wait, hang on. Argentina? I got a passport. I'm looking for a place to go, like on vacation or something. You know?
At present, Colombians can legally possess less than 1 gram, and in Mexico, it is half a gram that is legal. So they've already had a little bit, sounds like, of decriminalization, at least for personal possession in some of these countries. Anyway, the story goes on, but I'll link the full thing over on our social media if you want to dig in deeper into this. I think this is positive. As critical as we are of the details
absolutely.
in this.
I make fun of all of this stuff, but like this is very positive news for somebody in some sort of official position to come out and be like...
president.
Yeah, to come out and be like, hey, we're going to do this thing.
Yeah.
That's great. That's fantastic news.
Meanwhile, the U.S. government's official position is they are against even the decriminalization of cannabis.
Yeah.
You know? At least the U.S. federal government isn't going around arresting users or quote-unquote legal dealers in the states that have legalized cannabis in the United States at this point.
And I think that maybe one day we can set our sights on being at least almost as free as this communist country.
You mean Colombia?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perhaps one day the USA can also obtain such freedom.
Let's go to the phones here. We have Greg on the line in New York. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, everyone.
Hey.
So Greg is a fellow libertarian here, even though I'm a left libertarian. When it comes to war and governments, I'm pretty much exactly the same as an anarcho-capitalist. So I wanted to talk about, war really brings out the libertarian in me, and like what's going on in the Donbass region right now, and like in Ukraine. They're having these referendums, and of course, the way that they're, all of these governments, the way they're conducting themselves is utterly insecure and pathetic. Basically, take Russia for example. Russia could have called a lot of international observers. They don't have to be the official OSCE observers, but they could have a lot of people just going around and making sure that the people's voice is recorded faithfully, right? Ukraine has just announced that they're going to jail anyone for 5 years who even participates in this democratic exercise.
Really?
Peacefully voting.
Wow.
Whoa. Okay, so we need to recap here. We've talked about it over the last few days on the show, but you mentioned these referendums. What's happening is in the Donbass region, which is the eastern region of Ukraine, and then a couple of the southern regions, southeastern regions, they are having these votes that have been called for by supporters of joining Russia. And these people are saying, look, we want the people to decide their future. We're going to put this thing to a vote. And we want the people to come out and vote on whether or not they want to essentially secede from Ukraine and join Russia.
Note the lack of a third option.
Which they've done these things before, and it was overwhelmingly they wanted to break off from Ukraine, become their own independent nations, and then as their independent nations, join the Russian Federation.
This to me sounds more like, are you afraid that Russia's going to take over? If so, vote to join them right now.
Well, so there's two levels of this thing for me. So on the simple moral level, you should let these people be a part of whatever they want to be a part of, and not be a part of whatever they don't want to be a part of.
Individually, yep.
However, the truth of what's going on with this is that a proxy war between two major empires is being fought in Ukraine. That's all this really is. It's a proxy war that is also fundamental to the economic war that seems to be the foundation of the Third World War as we're experiencing it now.
And I just wanted to point out that there have been proxy wars raging for the last 8 years in Yemen and now in Ethiopia, and no one in the U.S. seems to care about it.
Greg, hang on. I want to continue the discussion here, and I know that you've got family that's over there, so I'm sure this is a little more close to home than it is for some people. I want to hear more about this. We've been following this story throughout the week. The voting, by the way, is continuing over the weekend and happening all the way through Tuesday, so it's a multi-day vote. Results are expected on Wednesday, and then what happens after that is really the big question. More coming up.
Did you or someone you love work, live, or serve at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988? If you or someone you know lived, served, or worked at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1988 and has cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, they are entitled to compensation. To see if they are eligible, they need to call Liberty Legal. Contaminants in the drinking water have led to these serious diseases, and legislation is now available for veterans and family members who may qualify for financial help from the government. There may be a time deadline, so don't wait. Call 888-918-1037. Anyone that has lived, worked, or served at Camp Lejeune from 1953 to 1988 and has had cancer, Parkinson's disease, or another serious health issue, the money is already set aside. 888-918-1037. 888-918-1037.
From Feature Story News, I'm Simon Marks with the Week in Review, and the week ended with the financial markets and currency traders roundly rejecting efforts by the new British government to strengthen the country's economy. A mini-budget unveiled by new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng sparked a crash in the value of sterling. The government's decision to unveil massive tax cuts in a bid to boost economic growth saw the pound fall to yet another 37-year low. Former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Bloomberg Television the worst is yet to come.
It would not surprise me if the pound eventually gets below $1 if the current policy path is maintained.
Earlier, the week witnessed the first face-to-face meeting between new British Prime Minister Liz Truss and President Joe Biden.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for welcoming me.
Public statements before the meeting were somewhat perfunctory.
And as you say, Mr. President, we are steadfast allies.
You're our closest ally in the world, and there's a lot we can continue to do together.
One thing they will not be working together on is a US-UK trade deal. The Prime Minister conceded it could be years before a post-Brexit transatlantic trade agreement is struck between the two countries. That meeting occurred at the United Nations, and there President Biden sounded the alarm over Russia's latest threats to Ukraine. He spoke to the world body hours after Vladimir Putin ordered the first partial call-up in Russia since the Second World War, and again threatened to use nuclear weapons in his quest to conquer Ukraine.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple.
On Friday, G7 leaders decried the Kremlin's efforts to hold referenda in pro-Russian areas of Ukraine, calling them a sham with no legal effect or legitimacy. Donald Trump had a difficult week.
We are filing a lawsuit against Donald Trump for violating the law as part of his efforts to generate profits for himself, his family, and his company.
New York's Attorney General Letitia James announcing she's suing the former president and 3 of his adult children for conspiracy. They're accused of falsely inflating the value of the Trump Organization's assets to secure loans on favorable terms. The week will be remembered more than anything else for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II in London. World leaders gathered at Westminster Abbey for the service. The Queen was laid to rest later that night at Windsor Castle, from where FSN's Trent Murray reported.
This really was the final goodbye. The state crown, imperial crown, removed from her coffin, and that coffin lowered into the royal vault.
And the Queen now lies next to her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
This is Free Talk Live. Phone number here if you want to join in, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can join us online anytime you want. Just head over to freetalklive.com and enjoy the features we have for you there. We've been following the referenda that are on the ballot, and a ballot that is now being challenged by up to 5 years in prison, apparently. Yeah. If you participate, according to a story I pulled up over at eutimes.net, because it was the first I'd heard of it from Greg in New York, who we're going to bring back on here in a moment, but he mentioned that anyone who is caught participating in this vote in Ukraine, because, you know, Ukraine's the big pro-democracy country, right? Pro-freedom and pro-democracy. If you believe the people in the U.S. that have the Ukraine flags.
That's why we're backing Ukraine, to make the world safe for democracy.
That's what they keep saying, but don't forget Ukraine banned the opposition party a few months ago.
Weird.
So you can't be in the party that would oppose the current party because, you know, democracy. And now they're saying that any citizen, apparently, who promotes or organizes the voting, so anybody that assists, like they carry a ballot box or something like that, faces a prison term of 5 to 10 years, as well as possible asset seizure by the state, including being barred from employment in select positions for up to 15 years.
Make no mistake, this is a direct threat on these people's lives. The government likes to say that, oh, you face a sentence of, and like make it seem like there's no violence in the equation. However, if you face a sentence of or a prosecution of, that means that they purport the authority to arrest you, put you in a cage, and if you resist, end your life.
The craziest thing about this is, I mean, we already knew that they were going to ignore these results. They already, before the election even occurred, they were calling it a sham.
Right.
So we knew they were going to reject the results. But now what they're doing is they're ensuring that any Ukrainians who were going to go and vote to stay in Ukraine, they're just going to stay home. Because they don't want to.
I was going to say, what's hilarious about this is that you've practically guaranteed that it's going to be a 100% we love Russia vote.
Right. Let's bring Greg back on the line here in New York. But now, Greg, as you pointed out, apparently the Russians didn't bother to bring in any third-party, voting observer types to verify that things are legit, if you will. Is that right?
Yeah, the OSCE, the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe, is usually tasked with this kind of stuff. And during the Crimea referendum, they were called, as far as I understand, by Crimea, and they refused to come because the international system, you see, they don't recognize regions of countries as being empowered to hold a vote, except, of course, in the case of certain regions. Like, for example, Kosovo seceded from Yugoslavia after NATO was bombing it. And NATO, they said that there was a genocide being carried out and so on. Very similar rhetoric to what Putin says about why they went to Ukraine.
Well, that's really not surprising, though, because if a country starts recognizing that parts of a country can leave, then they undermine their own monopoly over every part of their country. I mean, it's tantamount to if the United States recognized that Crimea or the Donbass can leave Ukraine, then they're practically encouraging us to leave the United States.
Hold on. Did I miss what you said? They're misunderstanding you, Greg. Did you say the OSCE, this third-party vote certifying or whatever organization, won't even consider this vote, or that?
Well, it's like this. They won't participate in actually certifying or overseeing the vote. See, as a libertarian...
So Russia couldn't do anything about this, then? They couldn't bring in a third party?
Well, yes and no. You see, as a libertarian, I would say bring in a lot of people who are bloggers and who have large audiences and let them oversee the vote, the same way we do here in the United States.
Sure.
Just simply have a month of calling everyone, hey, why don't you come and oversee our vote? That would be smart. But Russia instead shoots itself in the foot because it doesn't actually do any of that. And by
of course,
the way,
now if you go in and you oversee the vote, now you're subjecting yourself to 5 to 10 years in prison, potential prosecution by the Ukrainian so-called authorities.
Yeah.
So how many people are going to take
Right.
that risk?
On the bright side, I do want to say that in the last 5 years, we did have several populations take a referendum to secede. In Catalonia, they voted to secede from Spain. And in the Iraqi Kurdish regions, they voted to secede from Iraq. Of course, both votes were completely denounced by countries around that region. And
The
Spain
Madrid
arrested the
police
leaders.
forces were brought in Catalonia to physically attack elderly ladies who are trying to go to the polls with like flying tackles and drop kicks. I mean, it was an insane situation where they literally had so many cops come into Catalonia. They were bringing them in from all over the country, and they were stationing them in cruise ships that they had commandeered. They literally took the Looney Tunes cruise ships. No joke. There are pictures of this. They're hard to find, but I was able to find some within the last year when this came up before.
Yeah.
You can find them unfurling large black banners over the sides of the Looney Tunes ships to block the characters, because Warner Brothers or whoever the ship company was said, we don't want anyone to see our characters associated with this police state activity because you've commandeered our cruise ships, so your cops can hand it
elderly
up.
season.
Yeah.
Duck season.
And those black things make them look like pirate ships, no?
Yeah, sure do.
So,
I do want to say, I just wanted to basically say that this is why my life's work in the last 10 years has been to help people to self-organize using the internet. On the internet, there is no violence. You cannot talk, assault an old lady on the internet. And so if we are able to vote over the internet and we're able to inform each other of videos of what's happening right now, in Mariupol or Sa'ana, Yemen, I would like to know. I'd like to know what's happening in Kherson right now, or in
and the only way that we're going to do any of this stuff is through the blockchain. Otherwise, we're going to get censored. So, if you want to vote that everyone can see and count for themselves, then you have to have it on a blockchain. And if you want videos that are going to be uncensorable, because that's the thing, you can put video like this on YouTube, it'll get taken down. But if you put it on a blockchain, then you can have something that everyone can access.
What is your prediction, Greg? Like I said, you're somebody who's got some ties to the region, as I understand it. Historically, your family does. What do you think's going to happen? I mean, it sounds like Ukraine is guaranteeing that their supporters will not show up at this poll, so it's going to be overwhelming. It likely would have been, in a fair vote, it likely still would have gone to Russia, because most of the people living in these areas are Russian, descendants and Russian speakers, as I understand it. But now it's going to be overwhelmingly in support of Russia. So that's going to result in Russia declaring these areas of Ukraine as Russian territory. They're saying this is now Russia as of Wednesday, basically next week. And now Putin has said that if these are now Russia, based on these votes, then they will protect them as though they are Russia. It will no longer be a special military action. It will be full-on war to protect their country. What do you think is going to transpire here?
Well, unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong, but I think what's going to transpire is pretty much what you said. Both governments have completely botched this referendum, and it's going to be extremely lopsided in favor of Russia because, like you said, whoever is, feels like they're a Ukrainian patriot, they will simply stay away from these things. And so these will be completely one-sided and useless. but Russia will use them to declare, and of course the rest of the international community won't recognize them. But here is the real problem. If Russia does indeed recognize these regions as part of Russia, then by the logic of these ridiculous government approaches who don't listen to each other and they don't listen to other governments, they're going to say, well, it looks on paper like this is Russia, so now we're in a war. See, this whole time they were calling it a special military operation because technically, according to their own laws, they're supposed to use whatever means necessary, including calling up reservists and including and up to using nuclear weapons to defend their country.
While we have you for 1 second, so who do you think that America is in a proxy war against in Yemen?
Let's get to that question. Can you hang on, Greg?
I'll be.
All right, we're here with Greg. We'll get into the Yemen question on the way here. And the number is 603-283-6160. If you want to weigh in, you can join us in the remaining moments of Free Talk Live. But Beer Talk Live is still to come here a little bit later tonight. We'll tell you a little more about that on the way. This is Free Talk Live, and you can join us here.
Hi, I'm Derek J. I don't want a politician to represent me. To me, government is the idea that one group of people can coerce everyone to comply with an edict or face increasing punishments up to and including death. Despite perhaps the most noble of intentions, the best government services are a far cry from what could be provided for by voluntary interactions. Besides, the people who call themselves the government wage wars and put peaceful people in jail for crimes involving no victims. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
Is oral health important to you? If you don't like your own teeth, fresh breath, or kissing people, then by all means stop listening. Several years ago, I met Jessica Armand, founder and CEO of My Magic Mud, and I became passionate about the product that she created and never want to live without it. It's clinically proven to whiten teeth, but I find it does much more. They want you to love My Magic Mud as much as I do, so they're giving you a money-back guarantee plus 20% off. Go to mymagicmud.com and use coupon code FTL20 at checkout. mymagicmud.com, FTL20.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalklive.com. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live.
Oh, look, Cartman, your mom really is on the cover of Crack Whore magazine.
You can join us here in the remaining moments at 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Tonight, it's Ian.
Beakless Mountaineer.
And the Reverend Captain Kickass.
Beard Talk Live will be coming soon. As soon as we're done with the radio show here, we do a few after-show things we need to do.
Around about 10:30.
And at about 10:30 Eastern
We're not
time.
always punctual.
We normally are, though.
We try.
Last week we had some technical difficulties, which are resolved for this week, so we should be punctual this week.
We say that now.
But 10:30 Eastern time is when you can tune in over at watch.freetalklive.com. It'll also be on our other video streaming services that I won't even bother naming because they may or may not keep us. You know, sometimes they ban our show, and you never know when that's going to happen.
Especially the uncensored ones.
But yeah, over at watch.freetalklive.com, that is where you'll be able to see it tonight, 10:30 Eastern. It will not be on broadcast radio, which means you can say things that the FCC would not allow.
That's right.
We're going to go back to Greg in New York. The Peakless Mountaineer, you had a question for Greg about Yemen. What was that?
Yeah, so we were talking about how Ukraine is a proxy war between Russia and the United States.
Or NATO.
Yeah, well... 6 to 1, half dozen of the other, really. I mean, they're one monster, to be certain.
Sure.
I tend to think of it as the United States being sort of the brain, the head of that particular empire. But you know, your mileage may vary. Point being, it's two major world powers that are, since they can't actually fight with each other directly because it would end all life on Earth, but they also both want to take over the planet and have to solve that dispute. So they're fighting it out in Ukraine. And you had mentioned that you saw Yemen as a proxy war, and I wanted you to get into that.
Sure. I'll spend a little bit on the Yemen conflict, but I just wanted to mention, I don't think that calculus applies anymore. I think the governments are much more insane now. I think that whereas the USSR and USA, for example, were trying to stay out of each other, directly confronting each other in Afghanistan, Vietnam, Laos, and many other areas, they've, of course, destroyed these countries to smithereens, but they didn't attack each other. Well, now I think by the letter of their law, they are both like they're putting stuff in their ears saying, "I don't hear you," and they're literally. I think Russia is going to use a nuke. I hope I'm wrong.
Oh my God!
But it looks like it might use a tactical nuke
against whom?
In Ukraine.
Well, and that's going to be their place. See, we didn't nuke you. We just nuked the country that you were taking over. So, ha.
All right, so I think your question, Peakless Mountaineer, was who is the sort of the other party of the proxy war? We know the United States is one party, but who is the other party on the other side?
So the proxy war in Yemen started when Iran-backed Houthi rebels took over the government and made a revolution, kind of similar to the maybe Euromaidan revolution in Ukraine or other revolutions. But basically, basically what happened was Houthis are Shiites. And so traditionally Yemen was under the hegemony of the Sunni-led, Gulf states. And so the Gulf states didn't take too kindly to this regime change, just like Russia didn't take kindly to the one in Ukraine. And they went ahead and initiated a campaign of essentially bombing them, of course, with American weapons. If you go, you could see Jon Stewart in 2013 or 14. He had a whole episode about how we sold weapons to every single country in the Gulf region in order to promote peace, quote unquote. Well, those weapons are then used in what is actually a more horrific, currently, humanitarian crisis than in Ukraine. But I feel that because they are not so-called first world countries, Ethiopia is another one with a proxy war, we simply do not care. They have 40 million people, about 36 million, similar to Ukraine. They have a much larger and worse humanitarian crisis for more years, but we don't say anything. We only talk about Khashoggi, one guy. And the same thing I just want to say in Libya, we talk about 4 people, which of course are important, Americans, but millions of people live in a failed state in Libya, which we destroyed.
Hold on. Hold on. You're getting way away from. I had a really simple one-word question here. So, so you're saying that Iran then is the other party in this proxy war? Is that right?
Oh yes, in Yemen, correct.
So now, did I hear you say that Ethiopia is also a proxy war?
In Ethiopia, as we speak, there is a humanitarian crisis.
Okay.
That is, yes, from a war, which is essentially looks like a proxy war as well.
Greg, thanks for calling in here tonight. Feel free to check back in. Appreciate the analysis on this situation that is developing out there, and again, and I hope he's wrong, that it escalates into a nuclear conflict. Thank you for the call tonight. Because one of the things that, interestingly, here at the EU Times story about they're threatening their own people now with 5 years in prison for even participating in this vote to leave Ukraine and join Russia in the Donbass regions and their southern regions south of Donbass. This is Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk. She announced this week that the 5-year prison term is being considered. Quote, some lawyers believe those actions, meaning voting in this referenda, would fall under a certain criminal code of the Ukraine, infringement on Ukraine's territorial integrity, which is punishable with a prison term of up to 5 years, she said. She further called on citizens currently in the occupied territories to, quote, leave if possible. She said further that I strongly advise residents of the temporarily occupied territories do not take a Russian passport, do not go to referendums, do not cooperate with the occupiers, and leave if it's possible. So what are they planning? What is going to come next? Let's go to John in Delaware, listening on the radio there. Go ahead, John. John in Delaware? Going once?
Is it a soft J? Jan?
He was there. He wanted to comment on the Ukraine situation. Let's see. In the meantime, Sarah is on the line in New Mexico. Go ahead, John. Or Sarah.
I got lucky. So we have 3 homeless encampments that are approved. One is for car encampment. The other one is a tent encampment. Another one is just for women by the former jail.
How many encampments do you have that are unapproved?
Well, just all over the city. The unapproved ones.
Well, that sounds fantastic.
That's the reason why.
Who approves these approved camps?
No, that sounds great, because like the option there is either you have a place where you let homeless people be, or you're constantly kicking them out of their house and just causing more and more suffering for people who already have it pretty rough.
Right. Because they'll be blocking the sidewalk. They're both blocking the bridges. You can't walk through. They're just everywhere. So, and then we might have another one more coming up somewhere.
They're just everywhere.
So, but I'm just excited. I mean, they've got to do something.
In a police state, in a welfare state like you have in New Mexico, you're going to have a lot of homeless people.
Like the homeless.
You're from Seattle. You must know a thing.
Oh my God! Right? Like I can't even tell you. Like when I got to Keene, New Hampshire,
40% of the U.S. currency, you're going to have a lot of homeless people everywhere.
Yeah. When I got to Keene, New Hampshire, first of all, I was surprised that there were homeless people here.
There are. It's cold here, but they're still here.
And there are. Now, not as many of them, but like I got panhandled like day one.
Wow.
Right? Now, I would get that all the time in Seattle, so I knew how to handle it, knew what to do. And
I heard the people
that
stand out by the state road all day long and panhandle actually come up from Massachusetts.
I
heard
not
that rumor.
Doubt that.
Conan said he stopped and talked to him.
Oh, really?
And they told him that.
So they
make more money here.
I bet they do, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was surprised that there were any here, because I was like, small town in a rural state,
sure.
But yeah, they're here. However, by way of comparison, like Sarah isn't wrong when she says they are everywhere. They are everywhere, but the question isn't like everybody treats them like it's some sort of a disease, like it's some sort of these people are a nuisance in my life, and like
they can be.
I'm
not peeing on your front steps or whatever in your store.
I'm not saying but like, what caused the homeless?
Well, it's a different story for all of them, right? I mean, some of it's drug addict. They lost their job.
I'd say it's two simple things, honestly. Number one, it's illegal to build low-cost housing.
Right. Well, that's a good point. Yeah.
Number two, they destroyed the currency and made everyone poor.
Right.
So the people who
can't get out of it.
Yeah. So the people who didn't have to
and
be
let's
homeless,
be specific.
now
who
they
are
have
they?
to be homeless.
Who are they?
They
outlawed.
The group of violent thugs that think they run this world, the so-called government people.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, number one, the people who could have been supporting themselves, but were too close to that line. Well, they're homeless now. And number two, the people who could have had extra money to give to charities that are solving this problem.
They can barely take care of themselves.
Exactly.
Because of taxation.
There's more to come, but not on the radio. You have to, if you want to hear more, you guys are going to go for probably a couple of hours at least on Beard Talk Live. I think they've tended towards 3 hours.
Episode 6 coming up.
And that is a little bit later. It's 10:30 Eastern. You can go over to watch.freetalklive.com. And you can see them there. And if you can't tune that in for whatever reason, you don't have the internet, well, Free Talk Live returns tomorrow night. We're here live 7 nights a week, 7 to 10 Eastern, and online anytime, freetalklive.com. Gold and silver. You can own the most stable assets